Alright, so oh what the fuck? Now record this.
Did that startle you?
No shit. Was I supposed to be prepared for that? Okay,
uh,
so it looks like we are watching. Okay, now that I can see this man more close up, he's very ugly, and I'm so sorry. Like, I know I'm not supposed to be attacking people's like, looks, but I genuinely feel like what he's wearing isn't complimenting him in any way. Um, I feel like that's a neutral thing to say. That's not an attack, you know?
I mean, I just feel like the blue lighting isn't, and then he's pale and he's wearing like a blue shirt with this weird gray. Like, I don't. The colors aren't complimentary, but it's just funny
I
to me
might
because
actually. I think I have that shirt.
I'm sure it looks much better on you.
Wait, holy shit! I have that shirt in my closet. That's crazy. I think that's from Tommy Hilfiger. It's a nice shirt.
Just you caught me off guard with the immediate with the immediate drag.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, it's not even his most recent video. It's just trans medicalism is the only form of transgender that makes sense to me because it's got a definition, it's defined, and like you can actually say this is what being trans is versus the newer definition, which is just like if you feel it, it's reality. So I don't understand the big issue with trans medicalism, to be honest.
Have you heard of Calvin Guerra?
Yes.
Okay, so before I became a rad fan, I used to be a huge fan of Calvin Guerra. I thought that he was hilarious. I personally don't feel comfortable calling Calvin a she because I watched all his videos while being a huge fan. Um, and then I just saw all the hate on Tumblr from with people who were like, "Oh, I hate Calvin Garrett. He's a horrible person. He doesn't like he's invalidating all these trans people." And I was like, it seems more like he's against people who are making a joke of the whole trans movement. And I think that was like one of the things that opened my thought at.
I kind of started with Blair White. One of my friends is really into Blair White, like in freshman year of college. And like I know that they're kind of like they're grouped together as like trans traders or whatever, but because they were like drawing a line in the dirt of I'm a normal person who wants to just live this way, and these people who are doing these extreme things are not like me. Like I know they were very like hated for that, but it kind of made sense and it was kind of a good stepping stone for like a normie to at least understand some of the issues. Like not gonna say I support everything they do or say wholeheartedly, but at the very least they weren't actively trying to do horrible things.
Yeah, I would definitely say they make sense for a normie in general.
But let me go ahead. This is a 43-minute video. You're not required to watch all 43 minutes. That would be like a form of torture. But let me at least
I'm
start it.
ready. I'm ready
Hello,
with my
interwebs. I
legal
hope you're all
marijuana
doing
in
well.
hand.
So, for today,
Oh, I forgot to mention that we're doing this under influences. Obviously, it's impossible to get through a video of his without being high and or drunk. So, I've got my Guinness Extra Stout, and you've got your Mary J. So,
I've got my lovely little weed vape from some lovely store in downtown Toronto.
why is Canada like that? You can just go to the store. Okay. Back in my day, we had to find the drug dealer. And then, like, he'd have to, like, trust you first. You'd have to befriend him before he'd even consider giving you weed. And no one ever trusted me to give me weed because they thought I was a goody two-shoes. So I never got to have weed. You have it too easy. Kids like you have it way too easy.
I have it way too easy. I'm a goody two shoes and I have weed.
today's video, I wanted to do a discussion surrounding a recent discourse and controversy that transgender activist and actor Hunter Schafer, who is creepily hanging out over my shoulder here, has found herself embroiled in surrounding her potential transmedicalist views, as well as how those views connect with recent attacks on transgender rights, and specifically attacks on access to trans-affirming healthcare throughout the United States. Now, for those of you out there who don't
Okay, that was just a lot of words. for an opening statement.
Okay, so I don't know who Hunter Schafer is.
The dude
I
from
feel like I should
Euphoria.
preface with that. Oh, I never watched Euphoria because the idea of seeing sexualized teenagers made me so disgusted that I was like, I'm just going to boycott the show.
I mean, I only know because I've seen like a post on Tumblr that was like showing like lesbian couples from TV, and then they did like the little, like it was the little grid thing where it's like, thank you for your not you contributions to blah blah blah, and then he and Zendaya were in the middle, and that is the only reason why I know anything about this man.
Okay.
I want you to know Tumblr educates me on most things that I know about.
Oh, I guess in
Don't
the
know what
same
age.
vein, if you've ever watched Sense8, the lesbian couple in Sense8 is a trans woman and what's supposed to be an actual lesbian. And the sex is supposed to be gay because the actual lesbian puts on like a strap on and bones the trans woman with it, and it's like a rainbow dildo, and it's just like
Oh,
it's a lot, and I'm like, this is a straight relationship.
I just love when first off, I kind of don't like the gay flag anymore because it's been so commercialized that it no longer feels like a way to be like, hey, other person, I'm like you. Now it just feels really commercialized and like a way to yell, I'm super special. And I know that's kind of like mean, but like I've seen so many
But I
TikToks and
understand.
reacts that I'm just like, I can't. I'm fine. I
I
wasn't
hope
choking
so.
on beer.
Okay, sorry, I keep derailing from watching the video. It's like I'm trying to protect myself.
But look in the background. He has like I have one of those cube shelves in my room, but it's smaller, and he has like all those just I don't know. The flag thing just feels very commercial to me in general. So when people use it to be like, look at how super extra queer this straight couple is, and it's like you are the reason why you've ruined the flag for me.
Mm-hmm.
You are my reason.
Trans medicalist is. Don't worry, I will go over that viewpoint and explain it. I'm good.
I love how he's talking down to people and then stumbles over his words immediately after.
How do you mess up explain? Lord Jesus.
You know, they love to argue that estrogen makes their brains stupider because they think women are stupid. So I think maybe it's just that you are stupid, and that is the problem.
Women's brains develop like a couple of years at the very least faster than men, so I don't see how estrogen's gonna inhibit our brain development.
If anything, I mean, women tend to be better at language anyhow because of just like socialization. So, if anything, being a woman, taking woman hormones or whatever should make you a better speaker, not a worse one.
That makes sense, actually. I could get behind that.
Like, yeah, I'll incorporate that into my belief system.
Good with words in just a little bit. But I actually wanted to discuss this controversy overall, not for the Hunter Schafer of it all, but because I think this controversy actually provides us a really nice starting place to enter into this larger conversation about how we view trans people, the problem with a transmedicalist viewpoint, how transmedicalists often misunderstand what logic guides attacks on trans rights from right-wing groups and other people's misunderstandings of the reasoning behind those attacks as well, and then how all of this leads to trans community infighting, and then how that infighting ultimately only benefits those who are attacking trans rights in the first place, and not transmedicalists or all trans people in any way, shape, or form. So basically, while I am going to be talking about Hunter Schafer specifically,
Okay, this guy is not very good at structuring his video essay.
No, I'm already getting bored.
Cause like you don't like if you're going to do a video essay on a topic that you assume your audience doesn't know much about, which you obviously assume by how you were being condescending in the first minute and 18 seconds, then why not just use that as a path? Like you would start by explaining what transmedicalism is and explain Hunter Schafer's opinion on it and why it's wrong. Like you can organize this so much better.
The way I would structure this is be like, hello, this is the argument, this is why it's important to me. And for those of you who don't know who Hunter Schafer is, this is Hunter Schafer, 'cause I don't know who that is. You can't just expect me to know everything that the children are watching.
Honestly, I feel like you have to like if you're ever talking about a celebrity, you have to give me more context because every celebrity is interchangeable to me unless I hate them. So You need to give me like context. The only reason why I know
Context
this
is
dude
good.
is because I don't like his show. So, okay, let's see if we can, if we could just go into actually talking about something instead of continually, I don't know, using big words to sound smart.
Specifically, I'm ultimately less interested in her and more on the larger discussion at play here. And so as a result, this video is going to be kind of just more of a discussion and just me sitting and talking to all of you about all this. It's not going to be one of my more over-the-top, like, big cosplay videos that I've been doing, like the one I did recently on Matt Walsh. By the way, I will talk about my Matt Walsh video if all of you are curious about that. My next part is coming.
What do you think about Matt Walsh?
Again, who are these people?
He's the guy who did the What is a Woman documentary that everyone's up in arms about, but like for different reasons. The trans rights activists don't like it because it defines woman, and radical feminists don't like it because he kind of stole the woman, adult, human, female thing, and like he's trying to pretend he's the one who's in charge of this movement when he's not.
Ew. Yeah, see, I don't know who any of these people are, and I think I'm okay with that.
I love your ignorance on these topics. I wish I was you.
And it is a very big one, and I am doing a lot of big stuff for it, so we'll talk about that and I'll share an update about that at the end of this video. But for now, this is just going to be kind of a casual conversation about these issues, because I just want to have a more laid-back talk with everyone about it. And also, I'm releasing this video this week instead of part 2 of my analysis on role in the Hunger Games prequel movie, and so as a result, she's emerging as
Sorry, was he comparing the boys to South Park?
I don't know, but I've already finished one beer and it's been 2 minutes, so I figured I have to skip forward, or else I'm gonna finish.
Okay. Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Many trans people, especially trans youth of her generation. And I just realized by saying that does that mean I'm an old trans person now? Like, I'm only 30. Are we still the same generation? Oh god, I'm old now. So that's why people recently got upset when they discovered that she liked and then also left an ambiguous but seemingly positive comment on a post on Instagram that espoused trans medicalist views, leading many to assume, very understandably so, that the post...
I remember this post.
What's a base ad?
Do you remember this post?
No, I don't know anything. Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, that's the point. That's the point of doing this with somebody, because otherwise it would just be me interrupting the video and it wouldn't be nearly as much fun. I remember this post because it was on Tumblr and it was talking about how people who like non-transitional, non-binary people are detrimental to the trans movement for those who actually do transition. Which I don't think is a really like controversial statement. Does anyone really like non-binary people besides non-binary people anyway? Like, does anyone really?
The straight boyfriends.
They realize they can get an easy girlfriend if they just say the right things, which
Ugh, I hate that. It's just like manipulating gay people into liking you, which is sorry, another topic for another time. Please, let's continue this garbage fire.
I spilled beer, but it's fine. One beer. Completed. We're doing so well today, aren't we?
Post aligned with Schaefer's
I've
own
got like
views.
15%.
To get to that, let's read the post. And again, to be clear, these aren't Hunter Schaefer's own words, just ones that she seems to have endorsed.
I hope all of the people, NBs, who fought to have trans identities no longer considered a medical condition that requires dysphoria are happy because you've won. The red states are beginning to agree with you. HRT and gender-affirming surgeries are no longer deemed medically necessary for adults in Florida, and it's not going to stop there. That means more trans people will have to pay for their transitions out of pocket, forcing more of us into sex work. Y'all just couldn't stand to let binary trans people be the voice of this community. You had to dismantle all the guidelines around being trans to fit your narrative so you could feel valid. And
Role in the
how is anybody being forced into sex work?
I fucked up. Wait.
Have a lot of...
Okay, go.
Okay, so how is them not having coverage mean they're being forced into sex work? Who is putting a gun to their heads and saying, oh, if you do not have the surgery, you immediately must sell your body? That's disturbing.
It's just
Like, that's not the only option. Can't they just, walk a regular job? Most people, when they need a surgery that's not covered by the insurance, will pay for it from their job. The job does not need to be sex work. You do not have to fuel this horrific industry.
But, like, you look at how they present this stuff, though. Like, because, you know, like, the lib-fem movement is so pro-sex work, so pro-prostitution. And then they kind of present it as if your options are transitioning or death. And so it kind of all plays together as, here's a glamorous way to use your body to fix your body. It's all in the way they present it as being a positive thing. And it's kind of interesting because, in a way, Hunter is actually presenting sex work as being a negative thing, which it is. But I think that also kind of plays into why people like this are so up in arms about it. No.
Okay.
How many times have I fucked this up?
If you
Okay,
see
it's
your
an ad,
state,
okay.
you can register to vote online right now. It only takes
Has described
There
people,
we go,
like, for
okay.
example, saying that non-binary people are living in the safety of a cis body, which isn't the case because they're non-binary people, so their body inherently isn't cisgender.
What kind of argument is that? You're
Their
non-binary.
body isn't cisgender because they identify as non-binary. I suppose that's the argument.
That's just... I don't understand this argument. Like... I mean, I understand why they believe it, but I just don't get the gist of, you say that you're non-binary and suddenly, even though you're female and you're okay with your female anatomy, you're not female anymore. You're not... Just, it's so stupid.
I don't understand.
Oh, to go back to the days when I knew nothing and did not care about these topics. You know, my dad
Oh,
asked
to
me
be
to
11.
explain gender blockers, puberty blockers to him last night at dinner.
And how did that go?
Well, the waitress came over right when I was saying, and so Jazz Jennings will never have a functional penis or vagina. And then the waitress came over and was like, would you like a refill on your beer? Now it's just sitting there like, you know what? I'll take 2. Give me 2 beers, 2. Because, God, I feel like waitresses have this amazing ability to come in to the conversation whenever you're at the most out of context thing.
Jazz Jennings will never have a functioning penis. Absolute. I mean, you're right. But, God. I would hate to be that waitress that night. Can you imagine just walking around, you're like, just doing your job, and that's what you hear out of someone's mouth? Like, okay.
Like, it's not funny. It's just like, I don't know. It's just the worst time for someone to come over and ask questions. And then she came back later when I was showing my dad that video of that teacher in, wasn't it Canada, with the fake prosthetic boobs?
Oh, God, yes. That is actually, like, really upsetting to me because, I've been dress coded for wearing, like, spaghetti straps, and so many other girls are dress coded for wearing just, like, regular summer clothes. I went to a Catholic school, so your skirt had to be, like, a certain length or whatever. But this man is walking around with drag race breasts on, and nobody's batting an eye. The school board is taking it into consideration now after receiving tons and tons of letters in response. There's this Instagram account called Six Buzz, which people have as like the Toronto bullshit account that everyone freaking follows, and they brought attention to it. So hopefully, he's not wearing that bullshit anymore.
Honestly, I think he should be fired because he's bringing children into his kink, but no one ever wants to address that. And it's honestly very, like, people are trying to argue that, like, oh, this is transphobia because he's overcompensating for his gender dysphoria, and that's what this is. You guys are just being bigoted. And it's like, do you understand how horrible it is to be a female teenager and go to school on a hot summer day wearing a perfectly fine shirt and be dress coded because a bra strap is showing? Do you understand?
Of course, they don't understand that because they're not women.
That's true. And it's such a stupid art. Like, it's such a stupid thing. Like, anyone with eyes can see what's wrong with the picture, but they're just pretending that there's no elephant in the room because it's just easier to do that.
The elephant being the honkers he's wearing.
Yes.
Regardless of whether it's conforming to certain aspects of how we view gender and gender alignment, their body is inherently not cis because they're not cis. So already right off the top, we see that this post is being invalidating of people's identities and bodies and trying to define someone's bodies for them. But that's just the beginning of issues with this post. But
Okay, but I don't understand this really huge fascination with like everyone has to have their own definition for everything. The whole point of having a common language and a common like form of communication is to be able to communicate. And you can't communicate if everyone views red as a as a different color. And you can't communicate if everyone thinks that woman or man is a different thing. You can't make any arguments. You can't say this person is being oppressed by that person if you can't all agree on what you're even referring to.
And what is a proper non-binary body that would be considered to fit with a non-binary person?
I feel like I've seen so many arguments on that topic too. Like on Tumblr specifically, I've seen people argue like not every non-binary person is a androgynous thin white person. We can also
So
look like
then
this,
what
this,
are
and
they?
that. And it's like it just sounds like you guys are just using non-binary because it makes you feel special or it makes you feel like you can do things without criticism, but you're not actually you don't have any gender dysphoria. You don't have any discomfort that's making you change any part of your body. What's the issue?
Hmm.
We'll sort of save it because I want to start more just sort of on the surface with the logical arguments of what this post is arguing. Basically, this post has a transmedicalist point of view. The word transmedicalist, like the term TERF, is just a word that denotes this viewpoint, and I'm going to use it because it's the word that best explains what the viewpoint is. Though, as the post exemplifies, people who hold this view often push back against this word's use because it's a way to break down a viewpoint that is, as we'll talk about at its core, exclusionary and harmful. So how so? How is it exclusionary and harmful? Well, I've done longer.
Why is exclusionariness inherently harmful? I mean, just you have to exclude some people in order to include other people. An inherently tolerant society has to exclude the intolerant in order to remain tolerant. What's so wrong with excluding people?
Videos breaking down transmedicalism, which I'll link up there. And I'll also direct you to Cops Hate Mo's great video breaking down transmedicalism specifically, and I'll link that in the description. But to oversimplify, transmedicalism is a belief that some form of physical and medical transition is required to be truly transgender. Transmedicalists believe that things like hormone replacement therapy or gender-affirming surgeries like vaginoplasty or breast augmentation for trans women or breast removal and phalloplasty for trans men and more beyond that are necessary. Now, there are gradations of transmedicalism. Some transmedicalists believe that you need to go through all of these procedures to be fully trans. Some say that you need just a few of them, and some focus solely on just the genitalia surgeries as required to be fully trans. And so there's a lot of different variations of the viewpoint. But core to pretty much all of these beliefs is the belief that gender dysphoria is necessary and the cause of being transgender. Specifically, gender dysphoria relating to your body. Gender dysphoria itself is a sense of distress, anxiety, or depression caused by a mismatch of your gender identity, basically how you view your gender internally, versus either biological traits of your body and or how you're treated by people and society around you. Now,
Thoughts?
Thoughts? I think that any woman ever has wanted to be treated well by society and has thought about, oh, it would be so much easier for me to be a boy. But I don't think that means you have gender dysphoria. I just think that's being female. Um, and the other thing is, like, if you don't think there's anything wrong with your body, then what's the point of putting a label on it to say, oh, I'm different in this way, when really you aren't? You're just like everybody else.
I think it makes it really hard to define, like, if you don't have this thing in common where you have gender dysphoria, then how are you trans? What unites every trans person? Unless, like, you have to have at least you have to have one thing that you can say unites this entire category, right? I mean,
Well, we sure know it's not same-sex attraction, so.
how are you going to argue that, like, you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans? What do you need then? What is it then? Because it just seems to me
It's
like
just a feeling. It's just, it's like some kind of weird soul thing. It's very religious.
it is, and it's weird because, excuse me, we're getting this generation that's like seeing the decline of like religion in general, where like every generation's going lower and lower in religiousness, right? And I think it's not going away, that desire to believe in some kind of higher power. Now it's just being switched over to this pseudo-scientific gender stuff. Like, they're still believing in the concept of a soul. It's just the concept of a gendered soul.
Yep. I agree with that 100%.
I don't really understand the issue with this unless you're trying to like the issue is they're trying to include everybody, but by including everyone, you therefore crowd out the group you're originally there to support. I just don't. It's so obvious to me that it's like, how is it not obvious to you?
It's the
Back
same
to list
thing that
what
happened with the gay community, like in trying to include more people into the gay community, they actually excluded the real gay people. The same thing.
Honestly, because I mean, if you look back at like the transsexuals of like the 70s, 80s, 90s, I can't say there wasn't ever any chafing between them and the LGB part, but at the very least, there was a kind of understanding of we're better off together. We have a similar thing of like same sex attraction generally. And nowadays, it's we're going to excuse a man clearly wearing fetish gear to work with children because no one can define what gender or sex is.
Yeah.
would argue
We're
that they
going
treated black people in society.
backwards.
We really are. And I tried to explain that to my dad at dinner the other day. I was like, Dad, I know that you. My dad's a Trump supporter, and
Oh Lord.
he's very fun. And I was trying to explain to my dad, look, the regular gay people are not the ones pushing this stuff. I want to grow up
Yeah.
and get married to a woman and then have the picket fence and 2.5 kids. I'm not trying to force.
What do you mean 2.5?
It's
You gotta cut one in half.
well, it's the statistic that most married couples have 2.5 kids because it's between 2 and 3. It's
You heard it here first, folks. Siren's gonna cut her children in half. This is why the gays don't have rights. Now, could you imagine? People would probably take that shit so out of context.
well, I just mean like there are some of us who just want to be left alone, like to have equal rights and be left alone. We're not trying to enforce anything on the rest of the world. You just want to be treated like human beings, right? And when this backlash comes, it's gonna not just be against people who are saying let's put fetish people
Same.
teaching children. It's gonna be against all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think I might have gotten through to my dad this time. We'll see. I feel like I get through to him every other dinner, and then like it's somehow we revert back to like the first talking point. So we'll see.
We'll see.
Part of that definition is actually not part of dysphoria, but only specifically in how dysphoria relates to the body. Basically, they believe that dysphoria is only about your biological traits in your body and how those are at odds with how you sort of wish your body to be, and the only way to treat those things are through medical intervention. Basically.
Is it true? Like, I don't think the only way to treat those things are through medical intervention. Like, if I have an issue with my body, that seems more like your body. It's like mind-body dualism. Like, they're making it out like your mind and your body are two separate things, and that your body's just like this flesh sack you can just customize, but like you are your body. You can't separate the two.
Yeah. I don't see why they're so big on that. And plus, like, if you have issues with your body, for example, if you're someone with an eating disorder, right? You're not gonna be like, oh, you have an eating disorder, so you need to go get surgery to get all your fat cut off to make sure your body matches what your brain thinks. No. You go, hey, brain, you're wrong. And you fix that. You don't enable this thing that, actually everything my brain thinks is correct. No, our brains aren't always right.
Because, like, the same argument could easily go for eating disorders. Like, when I was younger, I definitely had an issue with eating, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out why I couldn't get below a certain weight. And if I had gone to the doctor and said, I want plastic surgery I want liposuction, or I want you to give me a gastric bypass, he would have said no, because that was obviously self-harm, and it doesn't matter what my brain says. That's not a healthy thing to do. He would send me to therapy. But to say that, no, I think that my body is horrible and I hate the way I look in the mirror and I can't take a shower because the mere touch of my flesh makes me feel physically sick, they say, okay, here, have some surgery. That just seems like a huge overreaction. Like, to jump
It
immediately.
seems like medical malpractice to me.
It does, and it's like, it's such a huge leap because they're not even trying therapy first. And I understand that, like, therapy, you have to want to get better, but at the very least, try therapy before you head to medicine and surgeries, which are going to be painful and cost a hell of a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, to put simply, trans medicalists believe in the pathologization of transgender existence, that to be transgender inherently is a medical and specifically a mental health problem. It's all essentialized in bodily distress. So, why is this viewpoint an issue and making people upset that Hunter Schafer specifically might be espousing it? Well, before I break that down, let me start off by saying I myself am a trans person who had gender dysphoria, specifically around my body, and I've actually sought medical intervention to alleviate it.
Hi, my name is Rain.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jada,
And I'm a folks member.
and I'm a Folks member.
I found
Of course,
personally been on
folks would have an ad on this type of video.
Folks?
They're the ones who do they'll give you like hormones through like telehealth.
Ooh.
They had a bunch of ads on Tumblr. I don't know if I like reported enough that I stopped seeing them or if they actually stopped putting them on there, but makes sense.
I've seen them before, yeah.
I love how he chose this picture for his pre-transition picture. It's very flattering.
Trying to show, oh, men are disgusting and I'm not a male. I'm distancing myself from that.
That's a big-brained way to look at it.
Hormones for close to a decade at this point. Again, getting old, and I've had 3 gender-affirming surgeries, including one that I've had literally less than 3 months ago and that I'm still healing from. You can even still see kind of the gnarly scar on my forehead here. I don't know if it's on camera, but it's like right there. And I actually did a whole personal video on that surgery. If you're curious about it, it's actually a video I'm very, very proud of. But I say all of that to point out that if anyone was to be a trans medicalist, it would be me. That being said, though, I am not, because it is important to note that it is not necessary to have gender body dysphoria or any form of dysphoria to be transgender. What being transgender is, again, oversimplifying here, is not identifying with your gender identity assigned at birth. Within the United States, where I'm from and other similar...
So not identifying with the stereotypes placed on yourself at birth because of your sex. That's, like, when you rephrase it just slightly, it's so obvious, like, you don't like the stereotypes you were given, and instead of just breaking the stereotypes, it's, nope, actually, you just need to fit with the correct stereotypes.
You just have to conform in one way or another.
That's something that it just seems so obvious. Like, when the minute that you put a little bit of critical thinking into it. Okay, so you don't identify with the stereotypes placed on you at birth because of the sex, which is basically gender and sex are the same fucking thing. Gender are the stereotypes imposed on you because of your sex. So if you disagree with that, then you just need to switch. It's not even trying to get rid of gender stereotypes or to further, allow gender nonconformity. It's just saying,
Enforcing gender stereotypes most of the time.
yeah, it's just enforcing them. Like, in the 90s, at least, we could see, like, little girls wearing clothes for girls, playing outside. You can be whatever you want when you grow up, and now it's just, oh, you don't like being hypersexualized? I guess you're a dude.
Western cultures, we're all told at birth, based on if you were born with a penis or vagina, that we're either a boy or a girl. If you have a penis, you're told that you're a boy, and if you have a vagina, you're told that you're a girl. When you're told that you're a boy, there are certain social expectations placed upon you, either being emotionally stoic as a boy, you must wear boys' clothes, etc. Girls are told to be more emotional, but they can wear dresses and have makeup and all that sort of stuff. But also, on top of that, all of us do...
Why do you phrase it like that? Girls can be more emotional, but they can wear dresses.
Because that's like a bonus. And also, girls aren't told to be more emotional. Girls are told off for crying when they're little children, like, oh, you're such a crybaby. Girls are told off for being angry, like, oh, how come you're being like that? That's not ladylike. Girls are told off for having like any kind of intense emotion at all. So no, girls are not told they can be more emotional. It's a negative stereotype that girls are more emotional. And girls are forced to wear dresses a lot of the time when they're younger. It's not that they can wear dresses. Many of them don't want to wear dresses.
I mean, if you look at the clothing they provide to infants, hell, the girl that I babysit for, like, she's a frilly girly girl. She loves dresses, but, like, the kind of stuff she wears, you can't play as easily when you're wearing a dress with all this frilliness and the bows that stay in place and all these hair bows. The minute she plays for 5 seconds in the park, all of her hair ties are coming out because it's meant to be ornamental and not practical. It's not a bonus. I mean, if you want to dress a certain way, dress that way. You can do that as a man. I can do that as a woman. I can go in the men's section and buy clothes. I often do. But to imply that, like, it's a bonus that you are able to, without criticism, dress and wear dresses. We fought for so long to be able to wear pants. It's not...
That's very true.
It's not that great of a benefit to be able to wear restrictive clothing.
do have certain biological traits that we're born with, whether it be having breasts or a vagina or a penis or, a flat chest or deeper voices, Adam's apples, those sort of things. And then there are things beyond that that are just completely beyond biological factors, like wearing dresses, for example. Like there's no biology there. The girls aren't inherently like just born with dresses, and we can see that very clearly within other cultures, for example, where we see boys being considered manly if they did wear dresses or skirts, like in Scottish people wearing kilts, for example.
Okay, but a kilt's not a skirt. I know it's a nitpicky thing, but like, I don't know. We ascribe modern like labels to older things, and like a lot of older clothes were basically just rectangles that were easy to fold and pin in place, and that's why the kilt is like that. So we have like togas because they were it's easier to weave a square than it is to add seams and cut in different shapes. It wasn't because the ancient Romans were wearing dresses, it's because it was easier to make rectangles. I'm sorry, I'm a fashion nerd, and that's a reason I had to bring that up.
No, I think that's interesting. I learned something new.
I just don't think it's necessarily accurate to call a kilt a skirt, especially because it's also not commonly worn. Unless you're going to like Scotland or Ireland or something, even then it's not commonly
Unless you're in
worn.
Canada in Catholic school. I had a kilt for 4 years. Everyone who is a female in Catholic school ends up wearing a kilt at some point. It's just, they're so fucking common for no good reason. Like, I don't understand why it was a kilt. Why couldn't we just wear a regular ass skirt? No. Kilt.
I think the kilt is more fashionable. That's my personal and professional opinion.
I think they're really cute, to be honest.
But his example is just kind of stupid to me because it's like not widespread. You know, it's not like in modernity at least, the kilt is just the thing that you might see at some like cultural celebrations in Scotland and Ireland and
Yeah, you
whatnot.
don't commonly see men wearing kilts.
At the Renaissance fair, sure, but besides that, like, that's not a great
Yeah,
example.
but I got a Scottish wedding? No, then you're not gonna see it.
I gotta marry a Scottish woman so I can see. I'll make it the dress code. All guys must wear kilts.
Sounds pretty banging, to be honest.
And so it's important to note, as I'll talk about more in a second, that being transgender as a result of this does change from cultural context. But the important thing to note is that we're all sort of told within our worldview today that a lot of these social expectations are natural extensions of these biological factors, that girls are naturally more emotional. But that's not inherently the case. Girls can be less emotional, boys can be more emotional. And yes, some of those things can be influenced by biological factors, like hormone levels and things like that, but there's no one right specific way that a girl or a boy has to be. But anyways, we're all told that we're supposed to fit into these categories from birth. But in reality, though, none of these things have to be aligned. So, being transgender, therefore, is just saying that you don't fit into those alignments that you're told to have. And this can
How can he have?
So is breaking the stereotype in any other way. You don't have to be transgender. Every time I wear men's clothing, that doesn't make me a trans man. It just means I'm breaking the stereotype and being comfortable with myself.
I just don't get how you can be so close and yet so far from getting it. Like,
He was almost there. You do not have to be trans to break the stereotype.
he literally says these are stereotypes. It's not biological essentialism. And then immediately goes, if you don't agree with the stereotypes placed on your sex, then that means you're trans. What? What?
Like, dear, you are putting those stereotypes.
Also, I want you to know that I'm on beer number 3.
Oh my god.
I have 4 more to go, and then I have hard liquor in the kitchen. We are at 10 minutes and 55 seconds. Let's see. Let's see how many I can get through before this video is over.
Alright.
be done in a bunch of different ways. Certainly, transness can come from dysphoria, from feeling your body doesn't match, as it did for me. And that's not an ignorance of biology, by the way, but an understanding of our biology that we have from birth. It's actually a deep understanding of our own bodies and our relationship to it. And it's also realizing that we do have many medical technologies today that can help make our lives happier and healthier by using it to help change or manipulate our biological factors and features. And again, that's what happened to me. I chose hormones and a lot of different surgeries. But again, some trans people want just hormones and no other surgeries.
Yes,
Some
you
people just
chose
want surgeries and
hormones that will
Again,
make you healthier by making your bones never be strong again. By putting yourself at risk of osteoporosis, you're not making yourself healthier.
And of course, the minute you point out this stuff, people will try to argue that you're being prejudiced or just bigoted for pointing out that there are legitimate health concerns when you transition and take cross-sex hormones. It's not like they like to present it
Yeah,
like it's like completely like there's no consequences, it's completely healthy, and it's not.
yeah, it's not bigoted. I have a freaking degree in biology, okay? Like, it's knowing my topic.
One day you'll be a doctor, then I can use you as a legitimate source in all my videos. I'll be like, I talked to a doctor about this. It's my very, very
Yeah,
smart, intelligent, and beautiful friend, and she is so intelligent.
you gotta make me blush.
That's how I'm going to introduce you in every video. This is my
Oh my
friend. She
gosh.
is the most beautiful and intelligent woman on this earth, and
Oh
you
my
should
god.
be you should be honored to hear her voice and her wisdom. But yeah, I talking about like just I don't understand. Okay, so if you don't need hormones or surgery to be trans, then why'd you bother with all of this? Because the answer
To be
is
special.
like he had dysphoria and he wanted to treat it. Okay, great. So you did all these surgeries and whatnot. So then what do you have in common with the people who are perfectly fine with their bodies as they are and just don't ascribe to stereotypes? They're gender
Nothing.
nonconforming, sure, but do you really think that you are the same exact group?
Mixes, matches, and is
They're
different
just
for every
kidding
single person and what
themselves.
makes a single person happy and healthy. But being trans can also not require any medical intervention at all, but just wanting to appear or be treated a different way. It may just be wanting to wear makeup or wear dresses and even still be seen or called a boy. Or you can ask people
So basically, it's you want to be able to break stereotypes without being treated differently because of it, which how it like that's just common decency. You want to be treated with human decency. I don't see how that makes you trans.
It doesn't. Otherwise, I would have been trans years ago.
Like, Lord, okay, I want to wear button-down shirts to work. Doesn't make me a dude, just makes me want to be treated like a normal human being who wears comfortable clothing. Like,
be referred to by different pronouns or have a more feminine appearance, or ask people to like just refer to you as a girl. It's all sort of different aspects of these things that we can all sort of present to make ourselves as individuals happy. And we all have the right to say about our bodies and how we're treated and being respected by other people. If you wouldn't disrespect someone's name, for example, by calling them a different name, like Bob, if they hate the word Bob and their name is Robert, then you shouldn't do the same for someone's pronouns, because pronouns are just as culturally made up and assigned to people as names are. And all of this can
yeah, but like,
Sorry, where did this come from? When did this become about pronouns? I thought this was about transmedicalism.
you know, they'd love to just jump around whenever suits them, but the whole argument too is kind of stupid because like, I don't know if my name was like Sabrina or something, and people called me like Sabrina the Witch as a nickname or something. I wouldn't like, yeah, it might annoy me and hurt my feelings, but it wouldn't change my identity or how I'm perceived because I would still be called Sabrina and I'd still be a female. Like,
Yeah,
there's a difference because pronouns are like either they are a recognition of your sex, in which case it's I visually see that you are a woman, hello, she, her, or you are playing pretend and trying not to hurt someone's feelings. And if you hurt their feelings, you invalidate their identity and then they have a whole identity crisis. There's like a whole there's a difference there. It's not the same thing as like using a nickname someone doesn't like.
so stupid.
can be done to alleviate gender dysphoria without requiring any medical treatments at all. And it should be noted that these people can still be binary in their presentations, aligned fully with being seen as a girl if they were told they were a boy at birth, and vice versa, but not wishing to seek any changes to their biology or medical aspects at all. Or they can also be seen as non-binary, seeking to present somewhere between masculine and femininity, or not on that spectrum at all, and just doing their own cool non-binary thing. But also, on top of all of that, dysphoria may not be required at all. Some people can have euphoria and feel really happy at just having their gender affirmed in different ways, whether through medical stuff or cultural stuff or social stuff. Or it can just be a general indifference, being like, yeah,
Right, this is cool.
that's totally fine. And it's also important to note that you can do this within your own gender identity or without it. There are some people who are assigned female at birth, for example, who will want to present more masculinely and be considered a butch woman, but still wish to be seen as a woman.
I love when they bring up butch women in their arguments. Butch women are still women because no matter how you dress, you're still the sex you were born as. You cannot change that. Your sex is ascribed in every cell in your body. It does not matter how you dress or what you wear or what you want to be referred as. You are either female or male because of how you were born.
Yeah, and it's not like a butch woman is a trans man. She's a woman, and she's breaking the stereotypes, and she's fine with it. She doesn't have to cut her breasts off for it, or any of that nonsense. She doesn't have to take hormones. She can just be comfortable in herself.
In the same way, like that's the reason why like lesbians can date trans men because they're still biologically female, regardless of how they're presenting or the hormones that they're taking. It doesn't matter. You're still like you can't change your sex, and sexuality is based on
As a,
sex. So
so here's a question: You're a lesbian. Would you ever date a trans man?
no, not unless
There you go.
I mean not unless they desisted. I like butch women, but there's a difference. I don't mean
Cease
to be
and
like
desist.
I don't mean to be like
You're a trans
contradictory,
person.
but it's just like I don't know.
So funny.
I like butch women because butch women are so attractive. They are so hot. I love them. And they're a dying breed in America. I will go to other countries to find me a wife. I will do it. But the
I feel like they're a dying breed everywhere.
in countries where homosexuality is either illegal or not like written into or out of law, the butch femme scene is still pretty strong. Hence, in Cambodia, the butch femme scene is still pretty damn strong. So, I think I have
I
decent
hope you
odds
enjoy
there.
that.
I think I have decent odds there. But it's mostly an ideological thing for me. I mean, yeah, technically, like non-binary women are like a population I could be attracted to, but the fact that we disagree on intrinsic facts of reality means that I just wouldn't be able to get through like being intimate or even just being friends with them, to be honest.
I
But
find it difficult to hold a conversation with one of them.
I mean, honestly, because like I don't know, I feel like I don't mean to be distrustful or like I don't know rude in any way, but it's like I've been through so many dating scenarios with non-binary women who think of lesbianism as like a aesthetic, or bi women who are dating a man and want like a sex thing. Like there's just so many examples of people who just treat lesbians as like less than human, as props to their own sexuality, that it kind of plays a bigger role for me. Like technically doesn't matter if someone identifies as she, her, they, them, no. But the ideological difference plays a bigger role than you would hope, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
While someone may present exactly the same way, but say that they identify with being a boy. It's all individual and is specific to an individual person. So while we do have some sort of base definition of being trans, also being considered trans within your own personal experience is also a choice on how you perceive yourself. And on top of that, all of this...
He never once defined trans in this video. He's... Everything he's defined has been... Trans is, you don't have to have dysphoria to be trans, but if you have dysphoria, you are trans, but if you just choose not to agree with stereotypes, then you are trans. But how is that different than just being someone who's gender nonconforming? You haven't defined anything.
There is no difference between them and someone who's gender non-conforming, except that they want to be special.
Literally.
can come coupled together with people seeking to transition socially and medically and picking and choosing which aspects of that they wish to do. I myself kind of fit in the middle of all of that, for example, because while I am a trans woman and I did seek to medically transition my body to present my body in ways that our culture understands as stereotypically more feminine or like female aligned, I actually present socially in a slightly less non-binary way. More feminine than most people, but not fully like over the top feminine, as you can kind of see my presentation right now. Not to say that cisgender women can't present this way, but again, I sort of like kind of play in the middle of sort
You're
of feminine
wearing
and
a
masculinity,
shirt
leaning a
that
little bit more towards
I,
feminine.
a regular woman, own. You're wearing colorful glasses. Like, there's nothing non-binary about your outfit. It just looks like what a woman wears to walk.
An unfashionable
How is
woman
that?
wears to work, because I would not wear that vest with that
Hey,
shirt.
hey, hey, hey. I have that shirt, and I can tell you I would look banging in that combination, but I don't believe it's for their skin.
Okay, well, the difference is
I
that you are a beautiful goddess who would look beautiful in literally anything. So,
no, I'm being serious. Like, I don't see how that's a non-binary presentation. That's just women's clothing. That
Well,
doesn't mean
they present
that the
it like if you're
non-binary
not
people are
super
normal.
hyper feminine, then you're not a woman. Like they're presenting it as like the height of womanhood is being super hyper feminine, high heels, full face of makeup, like things that accentuate having like boobs and like curves and whatnot. Like if you wear anything that's vaguely comfortable, then you're suddenly non-binary.
Different clothes.
But the important thing overall, just for everyone to note here, is that being trans is just saying, hey, I don't fit into these gender boxes that I'm told to fit into from birth. I may fit into some of them, or I may fit into none of them, but just the act of not fitting into some of them and then sort of wishing to transition away from that or seeing yourself in a different gender identity from that as a result is being transgender. Which then brings us back to transmedicalism, because the issue with transmedicalism
So he's saying
That makes
being
everybody transgender. That makes literally every person on this whole planet transgender. And I
he
can tell you wholeheartedly that's not true.
he literally said if you are gender nonconforming in any way, shape, or form, that means you're trans.
What? No, it just means you're gender nonconforming. You don't want to fit into the box that society ascribes you. That's normal. That's what being a human being's about. Holy shit. Does he think everybody's two-dimensional?
Honestly, I think so. I think that he thinks he's the only person on this earth that has more than two personality traits. And the idea that everybody ascribes completely to their gender, everyone who's cis, who doesn't have a gender identity crisis every 5 minutes, just ascribes completely to whatever stereotypes they have ascribed to their gender, and that's it. There's nothing deeper.
Listen, you know why I don't have a gender identity crisis every 5 minutes? It's because I have other things to do. Okay? Like, I'm a busy woman. I have a busy life. There's more on my mind than, oh no, how do other people see? This whole thing is just all about how other people see you. It has nothing to do with who you are as a person.
And that's the thing, like if you're gonna have like I took a class in like freshman or sophomore year about like the like identifying what the self is, right? And the difference is like you're supposed to be able to define yourself outside of cultural things. You're supposed to be able to say who you are without having any outside validation. If you rely exclusively on outside validation to say who you are, then you don't have a strong sense of self. And it's just
That
it's like the
the
whole
most rad things I've met have a pretty strong sense of self, and I'm really happy about that in general.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's even more. I think you're more enlightened the less you think about it, to be honest. I mean, I don't wake up every day and think, what will make me look more womanly today? I just get up and go about my day because I am who I am. I don't have to prove it to other people. The only person you have to prove yourself to is yourself.
Yeah, and you don't even have to prove yourself to yourself. You just have to exist. And I think I can exist happily without any of this bullshit in my life.
radicalism is that it views anyone who doesn't fit into a binary transgender experience, and importantly, those who don't seek to change their biological features to align with their gender identity, as valid. Not only that, many transmedicalists will say that not only are these experiences not valid, that they are just a fad, a recent social trend that like the kids are getting in on.
But with the definition of transgender being ever expanding and the rise of what we call transgenders, right? People who appropriate being trans for attention, you can act like they don't exist. They do. They're obviously not as common as actual trans people, but they definitely exist.
And well, certainly, I'm sure there are kids that
Okay, but Blair wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I know she's conservative, and I don't mean to. I refer to her with she, her pronouns because it's kind of uncomfortable to say otherwise. I don't see any point in being rude when there's no point in being rude. But she's not wrong. Like if you look like hell, if you interact with like middle schoolers, so many of them are just identifying as trans, non-binary, demi boy, demi girl, even pansexual, just because it's seen as like expedient to identify as the most open and accepting sexuality or gender that you can be versus just admitting that like hey, not all women have to enjoy high heels and full faces of makeup, or not all men have to be stoic and sexually depraved. Like you can have
Listen, I used to identify as being a pansexual when I was younger, and then I grew up, you know? Like, it is a phase. I've been there. I've done that.
And
I used to be
there's
like the
nothing
lip
wrong with
funniest
that.
lip fem ever. Yeah, and then you just kind of learn that, but no, I'm not attracted to everybody regardless of their gender identity. No, I was attracted to men and women, and now I can confidently say I'm not attracted to anybody who identifies as non-binary, because they're too up their own asses for me to be interested.
Which is also an interesting talking point because if you look like, I don't know, in a lot of these circles, they'll try to argue that any bisexual that has like preferences or is not attracted to certain people are like they're exclusionary because being bisexual means you have to be inherently open to any and everyone all the time. It's I don't
No, we're not your sex machines. That's why everyone who is looking for like a third for their couples, like swinging bullshit. They're like, oh yeah, since bi women will fuck anything that moves, um, yeah, can you be my third? And like, we know you're not gonna say no because you're attracted to literally everyone. It's like, no, I'm attracted to men and women. That doesn't mean all of them.
it's literally like this idea that like you have to use your sexuality as a form of
Dating
activism.
is inherently exclusionary.
It's inherently exclusionary. I mean, like, you have every individual has preferences, and it was perfectly fine for men to have preferences, or to even just not be attracted to certain people because. But like the minute that women say, "Hey, I have standards," or I'm not attracted to certain people," we're criticized harshly for it and called bigoted for saying, "Hey, I'm not attracted to everything that walks."
Yeah, and that's a normal thing. We're not sex objects, despite what the world tells everyone.
Out there that experiment with considering
Also,
themselves
just like
transgender at a young age,
I'm
as
going to
kids were
want
always
some
exploring.
food because I forgot that being high makes you hungry.
Do you want me to pause it?
No, 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 it's fine. Let's keep going. I'll just mute myself while the microwave's on.
Yeah. Okay. I'm almost done with beer number 3. I think I have like 3 or 4 margarita mixes left, and then I have hard liquor in the kitchen. So.
Oh, I think I'll actually start drinking with you after I finish eating. Crossfading time.
Woo.
Legally. Woo. Such a
Our
good
identity, and
evolution.
we'll put on
Jesus
different hats to
Christ.
see if they fit, whether it be trans or whether it be a goth or whether it be like a any sort of different identity. We're all sort of doing that as kids, trying to figure out ourselves. This is actually false overall because while trans people who have felt body dysphoria have always existed, trans people who have just wished to transition socially have also always existed. In fact, one could argue that since our current medical treatments for dysphoria are
No, wait. Okay. He was saying that people who have only wanted to transition socially have always existed. He's referring to specifically women who wanted to identify out of the restraints of their gender, like James Barry, who wouldn't be able to be a doctor unless he identified and presented as a man. Or you can
But
literally.
that's not dysphoria. That's literally being, trying to escape the shackles of femininity and womanhood.
That's the thing. Like they always present it like I hate when they trans like Joan of Arc. Like they have like that new play coming out where they've made her
Oh my god, don't
non-binary,
get me started.
and it's like you have
How
to
dare
be.
they trans Joan of fucking Arc? Like, how could you? How could you take that from all of the young girls who grew up looking up to her? Like, she is the patron saint of, like, almost every goddamn girl I know. As a child, I was raised Catholic, and it's just like, no, you can't just take her away from us. That's fucked up.
I just think it's
Am I
incredibly
allowed to swear on the
self-centered to
god?
be like today we view it as if you don't identify with stereotypes, you should identify with the right stereotypes, and to go ahead and look back at a culture where women were oppressed in every culture around the world, didn't have any choices besides if you wanted to do what was outside of your gender's stereotypes or expectations, basically getting married and having kids, you had to be a man. And so dressing as a man was not making you trans, that was trying to find a way to live outside of the expectations of what women were allowed to do. It's just
Yeah.
incredibly misogynistic to be like, yep, Joan of Arc, that was definitely a non-binary or trans man, or James Barry, yep, trans man, definitely not a woman who couldn't be a doctor in any other scenario.
Like, Joan of Arc she was a teenage girl. Like, that's part of why it was so incredible. That's part of why it was considered miraculous for her to be leading an army. Like, because she was a girl, and girls were not treated like fucking anything at the time. Not that they're treated much better now, but I mean, it just irritates me. That's all, you know.
It's a depressing thing to like, because people do sincerely think this is a like enlightened way to think about the past.
Not. Not trans the past.
And it completely ignores the context of these societies that these women lived in. I mean, honestly, hell, my dad will always suggest to me whenever I mention I'm having issues of money or of school or whatever, and he'll say, well, you just marry a 30-year-old man and become a housewife and you'll be so much happier. And it's like, Dad, I would rather kill myself. I would rather eat a bullet than live that life. And there are many women who didn't have that option. They lived with it.
Yeah.
Or they decided to dress as a man to get out of it. I mean, there's a lot of options out there for women during until like the last 50 years, if that.
Yeah.
What are you microwaving?
I just microwaved pasta.
What kind of pasta?
I don't know, it's fat and it has, like, holes in it, and there's meatballs. Let's sprinkle some Parmesan on this bad boy.
Is it not spaghetti?
No, it's not spaghetti.
Well, I
Actually, I
feel
don't think I've ever eaten spaghetti in my life.
I will fix that for you. When we get married, I will cook you spaghetti, and you will like it.
See, like, if I become a doctor, I really, really feel like my ideal life now involves marrying a very creative and artistic woman. And if I tell my family that, they're immediately like, you know, you're an affront to society and blah blah blah.
If you become a doctor,
Do that. And it's
I
like,
can be your wife, and I can be I can cook you dinner every night, and I will go treat my patients in my psychiatry practice, and it'll be awesome, and we can have like a dog. It'll be great.
see, that sounds lovely, but like, if I tell my parents that, they're like, oh, so are you trying to be a man by marrying a woman? It's like, no, I'm. I don't have to be a man to be attracted to women. It's just like I feel like this whole thing is only adding to how badly women who are attracted to the same sex are being treated.
We can just say we're roommates for life. We can just pretend to be roommates.
No, I'm like a romantic. I would want a full wedding and everything, so I don't care. When I decide who I'm going to marry, I don't care if my parents decide they're not gonna come because they're being big old homophobes. That's their loss. They're gonna miss out on a really sick wedding.
My great aunt is a lesbian. She has never told us this, but it's very obvious because she's had a female roommate for the past 40 years. I'm pretty sure that they're married and just didn't tell us.
I suggest you have a good conversation with that great aunt before she passes.
And then my great uncles, they're married. They did get married. My dad went to the wedding. We weren't allowed to come because I was a child. My dad was still like in this weird place of I accept my uncles, but I'm not letting my children see them. I love using that joke on my dad where he's like, why did you turn out this way? And I'll be like, Dad, when I was 6, you took me to Hooters. And I saw titties. And the gay runs strong on your side of the family. You have a gay aunt
Oh my
and
God.
a gay uncle. I think it's all your fault. Your genes turned me into a lesbian. He hates it when I tell him that, but it's like, okay, but it's true. My mom has nobody gay on her side of the family.
It's all from you, Daddy.
It's all from you. You took me to Hooters too. You wanted me to be a lesbian. You showed me titties at age 5. What did you think was gonna happen?
That's just what happens when you see titties. You can't resist the allure.
Okay, I have finished beer number 3. We're on to margarita number 4.
Margarita number 1, don't you mean?
Well, drink number 4, margarita number 1.
Drink number. Okay. Let's keep going.
All right.
A more recent development in sort of the history of humanity, there's more evidence for those who socially transitioned only throughout history. Not to say that people who did experience body dysphoria didn't exist throughout history, just that honestly there's probably more evidence of people who just socially transitioned, such as indigenous two-spirit folks or India's Haraja. Or we could even point to the fact
Shut up! Oh my god, are you indigenous? Are you indigenous, Jessie Gender? No? Then don't speak on other cultures that you are not a part of. What the hell? It's always these fucking white people, I swear to God.
I love when they use like two spirit or hell when they bring in clownfish biology. First off, you're not indigenous and you're not a clownfish. Neither of those things validates you. Like you're not either of those things.
No.
Not to mention
And
that
also, how is someone who's two spirits socially transitioning? They're not. They were majority of the time, they were men who were interested in other men sexually. That has nothing to do with social transitioning. They were just gay.
literally if you look at like most of these examples, it's going to be people who were gay, especially particularly men. It was usually men who were gay and who were therefore given a like social category that was slightly below cis men. Like I hate using that phrase, but you know what I mean. Below like heterosexual men, but above women still. And so they were given this like little category where they could like they were still men but like lesser men. And that's basically what it was. There's a couple examples of women, but like the one that I remember being heard of the most was like I think it was in like Russia or something, and it was like women who were virgins for life, and they would like basically take on this role to be able to hold property. And it's like, I don't understand how you can look at this and be like, this is anything but homophobia or a way for someone to escape misogyny. Those are the two options for what this is. It's that simple.
Yeah, for me, I always thought about like in Bangladesh we have hijras, right? And so when people are like, yeah, they were trans people. No, they're gay men. They are gay men who are ostracized from the rest of society. Many of them have been forcibly turned into eunuchs, which is horrific. And then they all live together because, they're not allowed to live with anybody else. And that's not a third gender. That's men who are being treated horrifically for their sexual orientation. It's homophobia.
If they just never want to admit that, like, they don't have any, like, historical standpoint for being trans or non binary. The earliest you have was that chick in Germany who wanted to be a woman, and so they gave her a bunch of surgeries that eventually killed her. And that's kind of where the trans medicalism started. But prior to that, every time they like to bring up like indigenous or POC cultures, they're always doing it out of context. Like they're never using it. They're never being completely truthful with these examples they're using.
Mm-hmm.
Social understandings of what makes a man and a woman who have changed from culture to culture throughout time, with men even in Europe seen as manly for wearing makeup and wigs, for example, as evidence of the fact that like social factors around gender have actually been more fluid than necessarily biological ones throughout history. At least our access to change those things have been more.
How do they know which ones to bind the feet of, or which ones to forcibly impregnate, or which ones to enslave?
And also, the makeup had nothing to do with being manly. It was a status symbol that, like, oh, my skin is fair because I don't have to walk outside. And I can afford this makeup. You can't. So it's showing I'm rich. That doesn't have anything to do with masculinity. That's a class thing.
I love when they mix up class analysis with like gender analysis, because it's like I don't understand how you can look at this stuff and not realize that, like, yeah, makeup and high heels may have gone from male to female as a form of usage, but the way that they're presented in society is gendered. The way that, like, for example, high heels in America were spread. Eventually, they were brought over to a brothel. I think it was like in New Orleans, with wearing high heels. And then the men who went visit the brothel eventually made their wives wear it because they were attracted to it. And so it spread that way.
That's
It
gross.
was never like, it was never as simple as they make it out to be.
I have promised to never purchase another pair of heels as long as I live, as they cause like severe damage to your calf muscles. And my calves are big and thickums, and I'd like them to stay that way.
Yes, my I don't own any shoes that aren't flat and comfortable. Like, I used to like heels because they were cute, but it was like I could never bother wearing them for more than like 10 minutes because they hurt so much. I never understood the point. Like, yeah, you look cute, but for who? What matters more, how you look or how you feel?
Mm-hmm.
More fluid throughout history. On top of this, there's actually been recent studies that have shown that few transgender children change their minds after 5 years after.
And it also showed that if you did not support transgenderism and children who identified as trans, they would desist and often come out as gay. So it's not the support you think it is.
Coming out as transgender. So this idea that trans people are coming out as trans as just a fad and then will change their mind later on is less the case than people would think. But that actually even goes against my...
Not to mention that a lot of people who came out as trans, like longitudinally, when they do like longitudinal studies, they end up killing themselves or having higher rates of suicide than they would otherwise. So 5 years isn't really much in the scheme of things.
I wouldn't consider 5 years to be a proper longitudinal study.
It's really not. I feel like if you were to judge me like I am 21 now, I'm a completely different person than I was when I was 11. That's a bigger difference than if you judge me from 21 to like 16. Like longitudinal means studying over a large amount of time, and I think that if you look at it, like I've spoken to a couple of detransitioned women on my channel so far, and typically it's been 7 to 10 years between when they identified as trans as to when they transitioned. I don't think it's as simple as just a 5-year difference, you know?
My own personal experience, because my own sister actually came out as trans while she was still in high school and actually decided later on that she actually wasn't trans. And I think that that's perfectly okay. She didn't go on hormones, she didn't go on puberty blockers or anything like that, though she and my parents did at the time discuss possibly going on puberty blockers, which would have been perfectly fine according to our doctor, and she probably would have been okay and gone off them and been perfectly fine when she decided that she wasn't trans.
Oh, what a liar.
That is like straight up a lie. There's no puberty blockers do damage. They stop development, like regular human development. So there's no way that it would have just been okay to just stop them and stop them. Like no, there are consequences to your actions.
Typically, it's Lupron prescribed off-label, and using puberty blockers lowers your IQ because your brain doesn't develop as it should if you were developing normally. So even if you decided after a year, oh, I'm done with puberty blockers, you would have a lower IQ than you would otherwise, and often you wouldn't be able to just resume puberty like nothing happened. You would be behind from your peers, which would have a social effect, not to mention the biological effect of starting late. Like, it's not just a completely blameless, completely safe thing. It's not true.
Trans. But she did play with her identity, she did play with her pronouns, and ultimately liked the elements of self-discovery that she was able to uncover during that journey, and it also allowed her to know for certain that she actually wasn't trans. And it showcases how being able to play with one's identity in childhood is actually an important part of being able to figure out who you are actually. It's often when you don't allow kids any sort of experimentation or ability to figure out who they are at all that these sort of feelings get repressed and ultimately become a larger problem later in life. As transgender activist and writer Eli Ehrlich wrote, some cisgender people cling to the...
Eli Ehrlich is a rapist.
Yeah, Eli Ehrlich is a rapist. Why are you using Eli freaking Ehrlich as an example? Disgusting.
I never understood, like, it's always like the no true Scotsman fallacy, where it's like the ones who did the horrible things aren't really trans, but then they also support the trans people who did do horrible, horrible things, and yep, they're still trans. It's just, we know what he did, and you're still supporting him and citing him in your little video essay? Okay.
Notion that they can change their children's identity, just wanting the best life for them. However, this typically causes intense trauma, distress that only started to get noticed from mainstream media with the death of Leela Elkhorn in 2014.
Leela Elkhorn, for those of you who don't know, was a transgender girl who died by suicide because she was traumatized in this way. Now, this view that trans medicalists have...
Or, Leela was a gay male who lived in a severely homophobic society who thought that their only option was to transition or die, as they have presented pretty confidently after the fact.
That only people who are bodily dysphoric are actually trans comes from the fact that until very recently, transness in our own culture today in the United States was only really understood through medicalization. A lot of our understanding surrounding trans people today comes from medical research from folks like Ray Blanchard, who's his own problematic figure within the trans community, and I've done a video on him, for example, who argued that transness required medical treatments in order to be considered trans. And a lot of that, too, also comes out of the fact that there was this sort of stigmatization of being trans, that it was seen as a mental illness, and therefore requiring medicalization. A similar thing happened with being homosexual throughout history as well, that homosexuality was also considered a mental illness.
Funny then how you can find homosexual behavior in literally every other species, but you can't find transsexual behavior in every other species. It's just homosexuality is found in every species, just not being trans.
No, you can't say that because then they're gonna come at you with stupid clownfish shit.
I hate that. Like, they always like to bring up, like, okay, so some creatures can breathe underwater. Does that mean humans can breathe underwater? No, not.
And it's not like clownfish want to become the other sex. It's just that when there are no females around, one of the males switches for the benefit of the species. There is no benefit to the human species to switching to become a female because you can't reproduce if you're a trans woman or a trans man and you've done all the stuff.
Literally, like, it doesn't matter if you transition, because there is no biological reason for doing so, in the same way that you can find in clownfish behavior, which again isn't comparable to human behavior because we're human and
I know,
not
it's
fish.
just that that's the one that they always use, you know?
I swear, it's we're not fish, so why does it matter what fish do?
And therefore, like, was seen as sort of a medical problem rather than just a thing that someone could be. But because of that, our society up until recently mainly only understood transness solely through medicalization. It's only started to become more mainstream and commonly understood that transness does not require medicalization. Some who wish to vilify this sort of understanding of what it means to be trans will sometimes point to researchers like John Money, who, again, is a very problematic figure within the transgender community and even outside of it for numerous horrible reasons, let's just be honest there. But the fact that John Money was absolutely terrible does not negate the fact that he is one of numerous researchers and scholars and doctors and therapists who have explored and come to this understanding of what it means to be trans and how to best help transgender people. Though, if you're curious about my thoughts on John Money, don't worry, I'll be talking about it in a future video that I'm doing on Matt Walsh. Many trans people, up until now, were only told to see their transness through that medicalized lens, and many still to this day only see it that way. Even further, as I myself have discussed in videos about my own surgeries, even for those of us who do seek medical treatments or surgeries as part of our trans experience, our being trans isn't cured or fixed or done away with by these interventions. Instead, they are ways to help us along with our transitions in order to make us happier and live healthier lives. They are not the end unto themselves. As Eli Ehrlich, who also had gender-affirming surgeries, said in her own writing, "It was not until after I had surgery and my doctor told me that my entire body looked better that I realized how this medicine can be exploitative of transgender people. I did not feel more whole or complete. Surgery did not have the power to confirm my gender. Medical professionals insinuated that my desirability and existence would not be validated until I fully transitioned. According to them, I would no longer feel trapped in the wrong body, which I never did feel in the first place. Instead, I simply felt satisfied that I was finally finished with such a large part of my own transition."
What does that even mean?
You good?
Yes, I can hear you. Finally, you're back. Okay.
Yeah, I was just testing some stuff with my internet. I think upstairs the Wi-Fi just decided to kill itself. So.
Okay, I was worried for a second. I missed you.
Aww. Oh, I'm back.
This feeling that Eli articulates speaks to, for those in the trans community like myself who do seek surgeries, sometimes feel that there is this sense and pressure from even trans healthcare providers that validation of our identity is only found through bodily changes or pathologization of our experience, instead of realizing that these medical aspects and things that we can use are merely tools that can be provided along a trans person's journey to help us live happier, healthier lives by being able to choose how we control and dictate our bodies. And this is why many trans medicalists will see
I just don't understand the idea of seeing your body as like a form of expression instead of just who you are. I'm not my body. It's not a thing to illustrate who I am. Me and my body are the same thing. You can't separate the mind from the body. You can't separate the mind from the flesh.
I feel like they are not getting that point, to be honest.
Okay. We have finished Margarita. We are on to Margarita 2/Drink 4.
Oh my gosh.
see trans people who only wish to transition socially in some way, or non-binary people, as a recent fad. They've always existed, but weren't understood, focused on, or acknowledged at all, and therefore seen as not actually existing because they weren't seen. They were made invisible. Buck Angel, for example, is a prominent trans man from an older generation than myself who argues that way, and is a very terribly problematic figure that, again, I spoke about in that video I linked to before.
Yeah, Buck Angel also, like, admits that sex is real and that he's still female despite looking male. So I don't know if... I think that's probably why he doesn't like him, but yeah.
I think Buck Angel's awesome. Like, he's always like, yeah, if you're a trans man, please go and get, get your pap smear and everything, and make sure that you're taking care of yourself, like, medically, and I think that's really good. I feel like he spreads a good message.
I do feel like a lot of trans people try to ignore the fact that they come from a different, like, they are technically a different sex than that which they present as, which in turn puts them at risk for pregnancy or sex-based illnesses, because they're not going to bother getting like a pap smear or whatever, because they think that they fully think, okay, I present as male, I am male now. And the trans community likes to present it as, well, you were always male, don't worry about it, you're not female at all. And then that in turn leads to a danger of not recognizing that despite how you're presenting, you still have to deal with some biological realities.
Yeah, I feel like it's very medically unsound overall.
So we can already see why there's a divide on where trans medicalists sit when it comes to understanding larger cultural context of being transgender versus non-binary people and other members of the trans community who are accepting of non-binary people and those who wish to not medically transition. But the reason that these views are a problem doesn't just come down to the fact that we're ideologically different, that it's just a difference of opinion, but the fact that these views can actually be used for harmful ends. And this person's post that Hunter Schafer liked illuminates why. There's been a large push recently by many right-wing and conservative groups to attack transgender rights around the United States. There's been, for example, attack on trans women's rights to be in sports, or all trans people's ability to enter the bathrooms that align with our gender identity, etc. But the big...
Okay, so I feel like a lot of these come from a reactionary stance, you know? Like, yeah, they're saying that, like, males who identify as females should not compete with females. And there's this common argument of, like, well, because they identify as female, they lose all their male privilege, and, you know, the fact that they've gone through male puberty doesn't play a chance, of course. But it does. Going through male puberty means that you have a wider wingspan, that you have a different bone structure. Even if you're on estrogen or whatever for a certain amount of time, it doesn't like negate the male puberty or the hormones you've already been on. And it's unfair to female athletes who had to fight very hard to be recognized in the first place, you know, in their field. And then, of course, when they'd like to have these headlines like, these states are attempting to pass anti-trans healthcare bills, they're really saying that, like, minors should not be able to sterilize themselves with puberty blockers, which I don't think should be a controversial stance, because as a minor, I didn't think I wanted kids. I still don't know if I want kids. I do know that I'm not ready to make that choice yet. And if I had been able to choose I don't want kids as a 16-year-old, I'd be sterilized, and I wouldn't have that choice to make that decision later on in life. Because, quite honestly, being young, you don't think of all the consequences of your actions quite that easily.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with being like, no, you can't decide to sterilize yourself when you're a child, because I feel like that more than anything, that's protecting children.
And I just feel like in general, a lot of these headlines are very attention grabby, but like, if you go through what the actual laws say, they're not that bad. Like, they really just say, maybe we shouldn't give hormones to children. Maybe we shouldn't sterilize children. And maybe we shouldn't let men or boys, compete with females. It's really not as reactionary as they like to paint it as. They like to make it way more hatred and more bigotry than it really ends up being.
Yeah, but remember, to them, this is considered literal violence.
Oh, for sure. The minute you use the wrong, like, misgendering is literal violence. You're literally harming them. You literally are supporting genocide. And it's like, that's an overreaction. I don't know how you got to the point where people support you for saying a man is a he equals saying you want that entire group of people to die. That's just an extreme overreaction.
That's like, yeah, it's really huge overreaction.
Has been to attack trans-affirming healthcare, especially for transgender youth under 18. Several states, especially right-leaning states like Florida, Texas, and Mississippi, have all passed or attempted to pass bills outlawing trans-affirming healthcare for youth and labeling it in some cases as child abuse. Beyond that, Congresswoman Christian nationalist and all-around kind of horrible person Marjorie Taylor Greene has recently drafted a bill that would do the same nationwide.
I'm one of the Americans that are sick and tired of our government allowing the abuse of the American people. But when it comes to gender affirming care, which is really child abuse, this is actually an assault and it's child abuse.
So a lot of trans medical care rights are currently under attack, and it's absolutely horrific. To know that care that could help so many trans youth is not only being denied them, but being actively vilified to the point where trans kids' parents are being criminally charged, investigated, or vilified for trying to take care of their kid and help them live their best life is undeniably awful, cruel, and disgusting. However, trans medicalists, like the one that this post exemplifies, argue that the reason that this attack on trans-affirming healthcare is happening is that right-wing folks who are pushing these bills are doing so because they believe that transness doesn't require medicalization. Trans medicalists believe and are arguing.
What they're saying is that letting kids decide whether they want to be infertile or not at age 16 or less is just irresponsible. At age 15, I thought I would die before I was 18. I wasn't thinking about a future. I wasn't thinking about the consequences of my actions. I was doing drugs, I was behaving just quite honestly irresponsibly, and I wasn't thinking about the future of my actions. I wasn't. And I'm not arguing that conservatives are right in this stance, but they are right in saying that children do not have the ability to think critically about the choices that they are making, and that it is inherently dangerous to give a child the option to sterilize themselves. And so many detransitioners are bringing up this point of, why were they allowed to get so far? Why were healthcare professionals allowed to just completely say, yes, I support you, whatever, and let them get that far without even really observing or questioning those people? They let them go ahead and get mastectomies or, surgeries that they didn't really need they're gonna be there for life. And they didn't question them one bit. They said, okay, go ahead. And now these people are living with the consequences of actions they couldn't really understand at a child's age.
They never want to listen to detransitions either.
No, they love to position it as detransitioners were never really trans to begin with. So, despite them, completely buying into the trans ideology and doing everything they're supposed to do, nope, they're not trans. They were just mistaken. And if that's the case, you're arguing that maybe there isn't a way to tell between those who are mistaken and those who are really trans. Either way, it's not a winning stance to be in. They're just silencing voices that say, hey, maybe we should think a bit more critically about how easily it is for kids to get hormones that can and will sterilize and harm them.
Arguing that it's non-binary and binary trans people who don't seek medicalization, arguing that you don't need medical intervention to be trans, that these lawmakers are listening to, and ultimately then saying, oh, well, if, medicalization isn't needed to be trans, then we'll just vilify all transgender medical care. And as a result, these trans medicalists are attacking and angry at binary and non-binary, non-medical seeking trans people as the problem. Yet, this belief fundamentally misunderstands where these attacks on trans rights are coming from. Right-wing politicians and pundits are not attacking trans healthcare because they are fighting for non-binary trans people or believe that transness doesn't require medicalization. Far from it. If you actually listen to the rhetoric that they're using, it's not just anti-medical treatment for trans people that they're arguing, but it's stemming from a vilification of all trans people overall.
But even so.
Yes. Conservative right-wing people do not like people who are gender non-conforming. And so that's where they are stemming their attacks from. They are anti-gender non-conforming. And to an extent, they will even support trans people who conform to the stereotypes of the gender that they're identifying with. So people like Blair White and Calvin, Guerra, they will support them because they're at least trying to still adhere to gender stereotypes. But it doesn't mean that they're completely wrong for criticizing the ease with which people can get hormones and surgeries and the like, which they often don't have. They're not presented with any of their options to. It's just, you will get surgery or you will kill yourself, instead of mentioning, here are the consequences of surgery, here are the effects of surgery. They're not getting a fully informed consent to what they're consenting to. They're just saying, yes, this is how I will solve my self-hatred, without realizing how those choices will affect their actual health.
Yeah, and the other thing is like, in the end, I don't think conservatives really care about gender non-conforming people's health at all. But I also don't think that getting unnecessary surgeries is healthy, especially for children.
This is how they like to like lump radical feminists with conservatives, because we agree on the point that completely unilaterally offering everyone with gender dysphoria surgery is the right answer. They like to lump us all together as being the same group, but it's not true. Conservatives don't like gender nonconformity. They want you to conform to your gender, and so they will still be able to accept people like Blair White or Calvin Guerra because they at least conform somewhat. Radical feminists, on the other hand, are arguing that, hey, maybe we shouldn't be like confronting a discomfort with one's body with surgery immediately as being the exact same thing, and that's not the case. You can be a radical feminist and just be okay with gender nonconformity. You can be a guy who likes to wear dresses. You can paint your nails and wear makeup, and I do not give a shit. You can be a woman who wears men's clothes. Congrats. I wish the best for you. The issue is that presenting surgery is the only option makes it to where a lot of people buy into this, get surgeries that are going to put them in debt, that are going to harm their health, and then, later on they might regret it. And what are they supposed to do now? I mean, hell, a lot of trans healthcare is just experimentation on people who can't fight back when years down the line they realize they made the wrong choice.
American Academy of Pediatrics, that was their book promoting puberty blockers, chemical castration, sterilization for kids. Okay? And that's in terms of the medical community, that's as mainstream as you can possibly get. And so when Rachel Levine claims, when he says that there's no argument that, within the medical community, it is a shame and an outrage that is almost true. There are exceptions, but they are few and far between, which does not at all, even a little bit, serve to legitimize this kind of butchery that's done to children. And the drugging of children doesn't serve to legitimize it. What it does, unfortunately, is serve to further delegitimize the medical industry.
It's not that they're listening to non-binary trans people, but the fact that they're saying that non-binary trans people and trans people in general are a social contagion, causing children to seek medical interventions before they're ready or can consent to such things. That apparently we're handing out hormones like candy to kids who ultimately won't wish to transition, forcing them to have irreversible surgeries that they'll later regret.
Okay, but
If you see
That
your
is
state,
what's happening. That's literally what's happening. That's not an exaggeration.
it is a social
It is a
contagion.
social contagion. And yes, children are being given hormones without much consideration. And yes, I would say it's like giving hormones out like candy to children. That's not even exaggeration, that's what's happening. I live in Canada, I've seen this. I recently got a new job, right? And one of the things covered in my insurance is that my university job covers $10,000 worth of stuff for me if I want to go through gender conversion stuff. Like $10,000 for my insurance. That's a lot of money, and that has to be given to every single staff member who's a part of our campus. And it's so easy to get this kind of care, and so many different places provide coverage for it. It just makes a lifelong patient out of you, and it's just I do not support this, not in the least.
It's just, hell, I just know I've known so many people who do one appointment at Planned Parenthood and come home with hormones, and no one ever tries to consider another solution besides hormone therapy or transitioning. It's always immediately medicalization of transgenderism. And I don't think that's a safe way to go about it. I really don't think it is. And for one thing, I think
I don't either.
it's just irresponsible to tell children that their options are to transition or they will kill themselves. To tell parents either you support them wholeheartedly or your kids will kill themselves. And then to only offer medicalization as a solution to this issue. Like, what do you expect these kids to walk away? What do you expect them to do? If they're being told, if the parents are being told their only option is to fully support them, or else your kid will die, they're gonna have that full support. It's not like they have many options. Even if there is hypothetically a choice, you have to consider the influences that outside society places on that choice making.
Told the child's gonna kill themselves if they say no to you know, the butchery of their bodies. The parents are gonna be influenced into saying yes.
And that's the thing. Like, I know that there are some parents who do have kids who they know are going to be homosexual and so therefore kind of push them to transitioning. But a lot of parents don't see any other option than I support my child or they cut me off or they kill themselves or whatever. And so they do the only choice they think they have. And that's quite honestly just, it's sad. I mean, if you love your child, what are you going to do? You have to support them. They're your kid.
You can register to vote online right now. It only takes.
But then the other thing that is scary about social media is social contagion of mental disorders. So we know we're aware now that a certain proportion of young girls who are identifying as gender dysphoria.
On the surface level, this argumentation does brush up against the argument that I was alluding to earlier, that there is this pressure by some people to only see trans people who seek medical transitions as valid, and thereby there is this seeming pressure to get medical interventions in order to validate one's trans identity, a pressure which shouldn't exist. And if this was the argument that these right-wing folks were using, to a degree, I would actually agree with them. The argument is less to say that medical interventions are required to validate trans identities, as trans medicalists would argue, but instead to allow medical interventions like hormones, surgeries, and more to be seen as simply tools one can use as part of a trans person's experience, to be used or not used at one's discretion, and with time to consider them and their effects on you, both long-term and short-term. However, while surface-level right-wing arguments may seem to touch upon this, that's not actually the argument that they're making. But it's actually just dehumanizing trans people if you listen to the exact way they discuss these things.
Describe the fact that someone who was once a woman, and really still is, had her breasts cut off.
Do you know who I don't understand at all? The transgender ones.
To są ci transgender.
Because if you undergo a sex change operation, you are basically committing a crime of self-harm. Every surgery is a risk. And these transgender people, to me, are disgusting.
But you'll also...
I feel like that's, again, the conflation of the right wing with gender critical people. You can be someone who is supporting of trans people with full informed consent while still criticizing the way that they funnel people into transitioning without full consent. Like, you can draw lines in the sand and still be different people.
Yeah, like I wouldn't agree with, like, for example, the last person just being like, oh, they're disgusting. Like, yeah, I agree that it's self-harm, and I don't think that it is informed most of the time, because it isn't, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna walk around being like, oh yes, trans people are disgusting. That's just, it's not necessary, I don't think.
Like, I do think there's very much a difference in people who are radical feminists and critical of transitioning versus people who are just legitimately discriminatory against those who are gender non-conforming. Like, yeah, I'm not going to say that, like, we should outlaw transitioning, period. There are some people who, if you come into it with the full knowledge of what it fully can do to you, and you choose to take on those risks, fine. But when you're pushing this on children who don't have the ability to think ahead, when you're pushing in this,
then that's not okay.
Yeah, it's a different argument. I mean, there are so many, especially of teenage girls, who are very much known for being at risk of social contagion. That's a different argument than fully informed adults who are aware of the risks, taking the ability to transition. I don't care. Go ahead, live your life. I support gender nonconformity in all of its ways. Go ahead. I just don't like the idea of
elective plastic surgery. They wouldn't allow, I don't know, a 14-year-old to legally get, I don't know, a boob job, right? But say, for example, if it's a trans 14-year-old, like a male, right? Suddenly for him to get breasts is considered life-saving surgery. But in the end, it's the same thing. It's a boob job, and it's plastic surgery.
Yeah, and I just really just I protest the conflation of conservatives and radical feminists. I've already made a video on it, but we're not the same thing in any way, shape, or form. We might have a similar disagreement with transgenderism, but for different reasons and to different effects.
Oh
Hear
yeah.
them just generally call all trans people gross and disgusting, it all goes back to this sort of right-wing idea that there is a natural way for a man and woman to be. That it's either God-given or like biological traits that are innate in us that mean a man is this way and a woman is this way. It all comes from this argumentation, not that like medicalization isn't necessary to be trans, but that the whole aspect of being trans is itself a non-starter.
Those are Christian values, but that's also just reality. These biblical values, male and female, he created him, but that's also science and reality. All these things work together, as they so often do.
It all goes to conservative ideologies' focus on tradition and what feels right. And as a result, to them, to break out of these gendered roles that we are assigned at birth feels, quote-unquote, wrong based on how these gendered roles have been made pervasive and thus seemingly normal in our society. And they consider it ridiculous to question...
They mentioned biblical stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting how they never once mentioned how in like so many Islamic countries you can be trans so long as you conform, but you can't be gay. And also like how much it is frowned upon in like any conservative society to be gender non-conforming of any type. But I wasn't born in the West. And they'll always be like, these awful Christians and their horrible ideologies. And it's like, you literally have it to be, that it's illegal to be gay in multiple countries. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, they present it as it's like when they present like Iran or Afghanistan as being you're so supportive of trans people. Why?
You can't be gay in Iran. It's illegal to be gay in Iran. But you can change your freaking like your sex status on a card, and that's like the only way that you can date the person that if you're same-sex attracted. It's not that it's supportive. They don't want gay people because being gay is considered to be, it's not even something you talk about in any Islamic society.
I don't remember the name of the book that I read, but it was in high school and I read this book about this lesbian woman who considered transitioning in order to be with a girl she loved, and she couldn't go through with it because she just couldn't stand the idea of changing her body to that extent. And I was like, I don't know, probably 16 or 17 when I read it, and yet here we are in 2022 and we're arguing that that's progressive to say that your choice is to transition or to remain in the closet forever.
Just like your choices are to transition or to die.
I mean, if you have two choices and you take one choice away, then that's really not a choice at all.
Nope.
In them on their face. What has existed for a long time must be inherently correct, at least as conservative thinking as a philosophical ideology goes. That trans people are medically ill for even thinking in the first place that, like, we can have access to medical technology that exists, like right now. They'll say things like, oh, you think having a breast makes you a woman? And the answer is no, we don't think that having breasts makes me a woman. I just think that having breasts make me personally happier, which is why I sought the medical interventions that we have to get them, and that thereby makes me happier, and also in a larger cultural context that might make me be more treated as a woman, which also aligns with how I like to be seen and treated and makes me happier as well, because we just like to be treated a certain way. On top of all of this, a lot of these right-wing arguments also ignore a lot of things about transgender healthcare.
Having breasts is going to make you treated more like a woman. Because women have breasts as a secondary sex characteristic, correct? Like, so many words to say nothing at all.
I love when they like to argue that. Like, it's like they like to argue that we're not trying to copy cis women, but like if that's the case, then why are you trying to have breasts and a vagina? What's the case? What's the truth?
If you don't need a vagina, if you don't need breasts to be happier, why do you want them? Why will it make you happier to have them as someone who wants to be seen as a woman? Why? Think about it for more than 2 seconds. Fucking stupid.
I mean, honestly, it's just I feel like a lot of this is just self-delusion of because how do you go about having breasts and looking as female as possible makes me happier, but it's not because
in general,
anything that greater society says a woman is. It's not because womanhood is defined by sex or anything. It's because I personally believe this. There are no influences to define why I believe this.
They think they live in a vacuum or something.
And it's so obvious, like, no one lives in a vacuum. How are you coming to this point of view?
Completely misunderstanding what transgender healthcare is. I mean, first off, it also ignores that trans healthcare has been heavily gatekept throughout history, either financially, with a lot of trans healthcare being expensive or not covered by insurances, or through endless bureaucratic barriers. And again, these barriers don't.
Just to say,
get out of here, okay?
like, insulin
Women's
isn't
healthcare
covered by
has
my
been gatekept
insurance, but
throughout
like,
history.
I love that idea that, like, yes, insulin is not covered by many insurances, but Medicare will still cover transitioning, which is not, you don't need that to live. You will live if you don't have titties, if you don't have a facial feminization surgery. I will die within a couple of weeks if I don't have insulin. So, yes, such a big, so true, my friend.
Like for me, like I know you're a type 1 diabetic. I'm a type 2 diabetic. For me to get Ozempic, which can completely reverse and get rid of my diabetes, that's completely not covered at all by my insurance plan. But like I said, $10,000 worth of transitional stuff is covered. How is that? How is that being gatekept?
I don't understand the argument. It's so self-centered to think that this is just, to not even question any of this.
Don't exist because people
And these are
believe that,
both
being
drugs
transgender doesn't.
prescribed by endocrinologists too.
Honestly.
Like any of the trans drugs, they're all prescribed by endocrinologists, but then so are the things for diabetes. And, why is this getting so much more attention when so much more of the world is diabetic than trans?
It's just the idea that, like, it's more important to offer. For example, I saw an argument on, like, Twitter about how during COVID, people who were going to have mastectomies because of trans issues were being pushed off because they had to give it to people who had, like, breast cancer first. And that was so horrible because people with gender dysphoria were just as at risk of death as those of breast cancer. It's just so self-centered to present it that way.
It is. Like, these people have never had real problems.
Require medicalization, but just the fact that they think being trans, period, is itself a ridiculous notion, and therefore not even needing to be understood or medically treated, beyond simply saying, like, oh,
just like, amen, sister. It's not necessary. It is ridiculous, I agree. Cheers to
that person's mentally ill or crazy.
Hi, my name is Rain.
Hi, I'm Jada.
And I'm a folks member.
And I'm a folks member.
Shut up.
On top of this, too, this is also ignored how medicalizing and gatekeeping transgender healthcare overall has always disproportionately affected trans people from more marginalized communities or identities who already statistically face larger barriers to accessing any healthcare, regardless of if it's trans-affirming or not. Again, as Eli Ehrlich states, the medicalization of transness that created these conceptualizations will never represent the community as a whole. There is no universal trans experience or biological mechanism that causes transness. Medicalization will always disadvantage those experiencing intersecting oppressions, denying access to trans people of color, queer trans people, and trans people with mental illness. In terms of vilifying trans healthcare for trans youth specifically, too, it even ignores that even if one can get past those barriers, that in most cases, trans people who do get irreversible surgeries are typically 18 and older, or have had a long history of medical care and discussion from therapists, doctors, and affirming parents who make sure that when they choose to get these irreversible surgeries, that it's the right choice for them. It also ignores that most under 18-year-olds getting trans-affirming care are typically only being given puberty.
I love when they do that. They don't, like, actually cite any actual studies. And when you do cite studies to refute them, they go, that's not truthful enough. Okay.
That was literally all of the stuff. Just the source, just trust me, bro. And source, a rapist.
The fact that you literally referenced Eli Ehrlich, like, that's, you really chose a rapist, really? That's your choice for sources? Okay.
blockers, if that at all, which are generally safe drugs taken with a doctor's supervision that are reversible once someone is taken off of them. And my friend Mia Mulder did a great video breaking down the science of puberty blocking drugs and why they're safe that I've linked below. Now, are they 100% perfectly safe? No, but no drug is. Like, literally watch any drug commercial and they will have a list of potential side effects, which often will sometimes include, like, death, for example. And that's why when you take puberty blockers, it's done with a doctor, and after a doctor says that it's okay for you to have them. And so it misses all of that. But that's just taking those arguments at good faith. If we just take those things at face value, it's just completely misunderstanding what it means to be trans and just shows a general disgust and misunderstanding of what it means to be trans in the first place.
How can anyone understand what it means to be trans if there is no agreed upon definition of what it means? If it means something completely different to each person, if each person needs something completely different, it's contradicting itself. What?
I mean, honestly, they don't have any definition for what trans really is, because that's what suits them. And the minute you try to question that, you're the bigot for saying that, hey, this doesn't make any sense. How are you going to have a word without any, like, set definition?
Is going on here. If we're being truly honest, these lawmakers and pundits are attacking trans healthcare because they're using trans people as a scapegoat to galvanize their voters or viewers with culture war bullshit to gain attention, throwing trans people under the bus in doing so. It's an incredibly cynical attention and power grab saying like, oh, think of the children's sensationalization, using trans people as the villain in order to gain attention and votes. And they do this by intentionally misinforming their audiences about trans healthcare and what it means to be trans. For example, just a singular one, they'll often conflate hormones, which do cause irreversible changes, especially in trans women who become sterile as a result of taking hormones after a few months, with things like puberty blockers, which are generally completely safe and reversible. These lawmakers and pundits will argue that hormones are being given to...
That's a lie. Puberty blockers are not safe. Like the blatant lie of presenting that as a safe option when it's 100% not.
Well,
little children like 12-year-olds, right when they
people know the truth.
I have a real thing to pick with the, like, I just have a real thing to pick with that, to be honest. Presenting it as safe when it's not. I mean, if my parents had been on the more supportive side, it would have been me being a kid getting puberty blockers because I was a lesbian who didn't know how to deal with that in the South of America. Like, Jesus.
Ask for them with no other doctors gatekeeping them at all, which isn't the case. It takes a lot of work to even get believed to be able to get hormones, and hormones aren't typically given until someone is 18 or at least has a therapist who says they can have it at around maybe 16.
You don't live in Canada.
Are there times where people
you
have
can tell
been given
this guy
the wrong
does not
drugs
live in
early
Canada.
or given a
It
surgery
is so
early
fucking easy to get hormones here. It's so absolutely easy to get hormones. You don't have to be 18 to get hormones in Canada. You don't have to convince anybody. But over here, a general practitioner, a GP, they are paid for as many people as they see in a day, right? So if you decide, okay, you know what, I'm not going to actually critically think about what this child is asking about puberty blockers and all of that, it's just cut down to a very short period of time. And how many GPs do you think are actually going to spend the time to talk to the trans identifying young child patient and be like, you know what, this is the danger and blah blah, instead of being like, here, have the drugs and bye, I get my money now. Like, it's so easy in Canada to get hormones. It's ridiculous. It's laughable.
I feel like that's the way it is in a lot of countries that are very anti-questioning, really. I mean, hell, even in Germany, you can change they have self-ID laws that are so strong that you can change your gender once a year, no...
Every year, that's crazy. Why do you need to change that shit once a year?
You should not have your identity fluctuate so broadly once a year. I feel like you should only get maybe like 2 crises about your identity per lifetime. I don't think you should have much more than that.
To detransition or to cause mental health problems. 100%. I am not denying that hasn't happened. It definitely has. But statistically, those are outlier cases, and the argument for that is not to say that we shouldn't have any trans-affirming healthcare at all, but to make sure that we do trans-affirming healthcare better and have better sort of ways of understanding what to do for trans healthcare for individual people. But not only that, these lawmakers also ignore the fact that puberty blockers are given to non-trans children for things like hormone imbalances. So these lawmakers will lie about the dangers of puberty blockers and argue that trans kids shouldn't have them.
Where were mine? I had a hormone imbalance my entire life. I was never once prescribed that. What are you talking about? Literally, what are you talking about? If you're a girl and you have any kind of hormone imbalance, you get thrown birth control. You don't get given puberty blockers. That's just a blatant lie. Are you kidding me? This is how I know. This person is not a woman. They have no idea about anything to do with what women grow up with.
They like to sexualize what girlhood is like, and then otherwise reduce it down to stereotypes. And all the negative stuff, if it can't be sexualized, it's not included in what they think womanhood actually is.
We need to do another video, but on that fucking Dylan person.
I know, the Dylan is a personality, we'll put it like that.
Yeah.
Or that other kids take them safely, which just directly shows how these rhetorics are just being used to discriminate against trans people. Another example could be a new fake viral news story pushed by conservative news organization The Daily Wire recently showed information that the puberty-blocking drug Lupron was linked to thousands of deaths, 6,370 to be precise.
And it was also linked to a lowered IQ. Don't forget that. It makes you less smart.
However, the drug is used not only for puberty blocking.
Let's talk about BetterHelp. If you ever feel anxious, depressed, stressed, overwhelmed,
but also prostate cancer, and those 6,000 deaths were of cancer patients. Information that the Daily Wire intentionally left out, making it seem like it was trans kids being killed by the drug, further vilifying trans care. And that's just one example. These pundits and lawmakers will lie about trans people all the time, saying things like we don't understand biology, when we actually understand biology probably better than most people, especially when it relates to our own self. It's not like we're ignoring what our biology is, or that we're saying that, certain aspects of a person make them inherently a woman or a man. We're actually saying completely the opposite. They also generate the stigma that we're all mentally ill, a stigma that trans medicalists help, incidentally bolstering by saying that transness only stems from dysphoria, by the way. Or these lawmakers and pundits will argue that we're sexualizing and harming children in order to vilify and dehumanize trans people to their base, then causing their audience to go and attack us, and then incidentally vote for them and watch their shows. All this should be keyed in by the fact that they use terms like social contagion. That should show you the dehumanizing aspects of all of this. Those sort of phrases are often used to dehumanize people. They are trying to argue that trans people are inherently less than. It's not that these people are for affirming all trans people no matter what, because, we want to be especially helpful to the non-binary trans people, and trans medicalization is awful because you don't need medicalization to be trans. It's literally just, trans people are icky and disgusting, gross, and also evil, so let's deny them all that we can. Even further, we can see how many trans medicalist groups, such as SEGM, often run by cisgender men who led research in the pathologization of transgender people, such as Ray Blanchard, are often the ones who bolstered this idea of transness being a social contagion, and argue for the elimination of transgender people. That's not just hyperbole, as we can see in this SEGM interview that argued for the elimination of transgender healthcare for trans youth, and trans youth care in general. Not to mention that they helped create these laws that the person posting at the beginning of this video was upset about, with SEGM even helping draft the Florida anti-transgender healthcare law.
Okay, but the problem is that transgenderism either arises from internalized homophobia or from a discomfort with being gender non-conforming, which I don't see an issue with getting rid of that. It is a mental illness in the extent that if you are uncomfortable with your body, you cannot change. Your body and mind are not separate beings. You can't just change your body like a Mr. Potato Doll and change out parts easily without any consequences. The people who are going through this are dealing with mental health issues and should be treated as such. It's not like it's as simple as let's just be, accepting of everything. It's not that simple.
Yeah, but if you say it like that, then that means fewer people are gonna get surgeries and fewer people are gonna profit.
Of course, because I remember reading a study at some point that was saying that it was like, $1 million plus profit in each person if they went through all the surgeries. Why would they want to actually find a different non-surgical route for treatment when it would give them less money?
Exactly. Also, I just want to mention, this entire video, like every time you go to play the video, there's like this demonic echo. So the longer you let it play, like the funnier the echo sounds, to the point where I'm like, this sounds like the craziest shit I've ever heard in my whole life. Except with the trans talking points, which makes it even funnier, and I'm like, I think I'm going slightly insane over here, but
I mean, I will see how it turns out in the recording stage. For all I know, this could just be a fun experiment that doesn't get posted because my recording software was shitty. But on my end, at least, I'm hearing
that's fine. I'm having a lot of fun, so.
At the very least, I'm getting your voice in through clearly, so I'll take it.
Literally, trans medicalists are the ones furthering the elimination of healthcare rights for trans youth, not non-binary trans people as the earlier angry post claimed. Even further, trans medicalists like Ray Blanchard have appeared on numerous right-wing podcasts and platforms. Trans medicalists, along with right-wing conservatives, are the ones arguing for the elimination of transgender people in general, not non-binary people. Like, being honest with you, I really don't understand how people don't see that if something like all trans-affirming healthcare were somehow instantly outlawed tomorrow, these attacks wouldn't stop there. Not only would they try to outlaw all trans healthcare, not just for youth, but then they would continue on from that to attack us with bathroom laws in order to try to push any trans people, non-binary, binary, medicalist or not, out of public view. To say that it's not okay to be trans at all. It's all about putting people back in our boxes, to not allow us to be out and be safe as ourselves. It's trying to force us to be a
Excuse me,
certain way.
being trans is all about going from one box to another box anyway. So it's not like, oh no, they're gonna put us back in our boxes. You are fighting to be able to go from one box to another box. That's all you're fighting for.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I don't think a lot of trans people realize they're not fighting to dissolve gender stereotypes. They're fighting to just say that you have the freedom to choose between which stereotypes you agree with the most. Because in an ideal world, it would be, it doesn't matter what you do or how you act or what you wear, you can be a woman or a man, and it doesn't reflect badly on you for dressing in a certain way or acting in a certain way.
Galvanize people is that transness, both as a concept and us as people that exist, inherently push at the barriers and hierarchical structures that our society is set up with. Like, for example, there is one aspect of the trans medicalist post that I do agree with. We should be.
You support it. You support the hierarchy. You literally, trans women are treated better than most men when it comes to like speaking. Okay, they're like speaking over women, like such as Dylan, as I brought up earlier, being invited to speak for women by Forbes. Like, these are men who are speaking over women and using this as a way to do that. Like, they're not taking down any kind of institution. They're just going, oh, I can identify into womanhood and I can fit into a different box and just change the color of my box and look, now I'm a woman. Now I have the right to take away the power that women fought for. But yes.
It's all just, it's kind of depressing. I feel like all of these videos kind of say the same damn thing. No matter what you argue, it's always the same couple arguments, and of course it all stems from my just general misunderstanding of what womanhood is like. It's really that simple.
Listening to transgender people of color, both binary and non-binary. Because, as writer Maria Lagunes discusses, and the wonderful YouTube creator Lily Alexander explored in her own video, our very ideas of womanhood and gender norms in today's Western culture stem from colonialization's attempts to downplay black folks, and specifically black women's humanity, compared to the fragile, passive white woman. Black women weren't seen as women and not even as human. Gender is a construct created.
You know, it's funny to me because they like to present black women and trans women as being the exact same thing. But I assure you, when white slave owners were choosing who to rape and who to sexually abuse, they could very easily tell who was women and who were men. It's just
like, I'm brown. I don't have any meaningful amount of white in me, and I know for a fact that like it does not matter what race you're a part of. If you're a woman, you're a woman. It doesn't change that. These people can't seem to grasp that, the whole concept of intersectionality came from, being able to see women being oppressed on the axis of their sex and the axis of their race, right? Like, it began with seeing women, especially black women, but now they're co-opting this for trans. Like, they have nothing original.
I mean, how they steal most of their slogans from other movements anyway, so I don't think anyone could ever accuse them of being original.
Oh god.
Not only to reinforce a binary of man above woman, but also as white people above black people. So it's important to point out that while white trans folks like myself do face discrimination both as women and as trans people, and we shouldn't ignore that, we are also not the primary targets of transphobia. Black trans women and non-binary folks are. But transmedicalists don't see this at all because they've centralized...
You're saying that black women and non-binary folks are the main target of transphobia?
What?
I'm... okay. At this point...
I thought the main targets of transphobia were trans sex workers. Like, hasn't that been proven?
The concept that the women of color in general are lesser women it illustrates how racist this movement is. Black women, Asian women, women of any fucking color on this earth are women because they have double X chromosomes and they are of the sex that produce ova. They are adult human females. You can differentiate from those women from the men of the same race. And to argue that being treated in a wrong manner is because of misplaced transphobia is just blatantly misogynistic. Those women are not treated like that because people think they're men. They do that because they're fucking racist.
their experience of transness as the only valid one of it. And while some may be willing to acknowledge the discrimination faced by black folks, as this post exemplifies, they will create a barrier within their own community and gatekeep who is seen as trans or not. The truth is, we're all discriminated against and we're all allies in this fight, and quite often non-binary people are the ones even more vilified because we're not even seen as willing to exist, whereas some transmedicalist people will be sort of limitedly accepted by right-wing groups because they are pushing against non-binary people and aligning again with this idea that there is a right way for a woman to be. However, many times these transmedicalist folks will push further misinformation about trans people. Like, for example, trans man Scott Nugent recently appeared in Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary and spread a lot of misinformation and outright false facts about transgender surgeries and aspects of the medical community around it. Now, I know I'm making a big claim there, and I'm not going to really explore that further in this video, but I will be talking about it and getting more into the specifics of that claim in further videos. But
so
if you want a video right now talking about
to speak over other trans people?
I mean, he's a white male, so...
What gives you the authority? Like, even in my lib feminist of lib feminist days, I would still be like, but what makes you the authority on every trans person? Why does everyone have to listen to you? Clearly, these other trans people have differing viewpoints. Why is it that you are right and they're all wrong when there's so many of them who are saying the same thing?
I mean, honestly.
What makes you the trans savior?
Well, he's trans and he's white, and he has a YouTube audience, which obviously makes him the voice of every trans person on the planet Earth.
Like, you're not dying for the sins of the trans people. Like, you're not Jesus. Get over yourself.
Yeah, I wish it was that easy.
A transmedicalist trans person who has spread misinformation deliberately about the trans community, I've also talked about Buck Angel doing the same in a video that I discussed earlier about him. Which brings me to my last point, because speaking of which, I do realize my own privilege within all of this. I'm a trans person who does come from a decently middle-class background, who lives in a trans-affirming area with insurance that covers most of my surgeries, and I was also able to get and afford all of them. So I do have a very deep sympathy for the anger and emotion that those who have been denied access to the care that helped save my life. It honestly pisses me off that anyone would be denied the care that literally just made me who I am and allowed me to continue living today. And it's that same anger that...
I resent that. I am literally choosing to move countries because if I did not, I would die of insulin rationing. You would not die because you didn't have facial feminization surgery. You would not die for a lack of hormone therapy. I sincerely hate people like you who like to equivalate not looking the way you want to look with actual life-saving medicine and or medical treatment.
I also think it's completely absurd how you have to ration insulin and it's not just free.
America, the land of the great, the land of the free, the land of the dying young because you can't afford fucking insulin.
Transmedicalists do feel. Transmedicalists, like other trans people, are being gatekept from their own affirming care that could help change and save their lives. But because they've been so gatekept and misunderstand a trans experience, they take their anger out not at those vilifying and attacking trans rights, but those who they don't want to understand, non-binary and non-medically transitioning trans people, because they're the ones that are closest to them and they can lash out against. It's similar to what TERFs have done, being cisgender women who have sublimated their trauma and pain at living in a patriarchal society that does attack and dehumanize all women, but then place that blame on trans people. But ultimately, like how TERFs are stoking up.
You are not a woman.
But isn't it like white man culture to speak over women? And his
Yeah, like, we are not lashing out at you because you're the closest to us. No. We're not lashing out at anyone except for men. And you're...
He did the same argument in his Handmaid's Tale video where he was going on and on about how he could provide a specific point of view on feminism that women just couldn't provide. And it's just like, maybe you don't understand this point of view because it doesn't involve you. Maybe this is not about you. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's not about you because you're not a woman. The Handmaid's Tale was never written for you.
The Handmaid's Tale is about women's oppression, and you're not a woman, so it's really that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Women, just cisgender women versus trans women in this case, so too are trans medicalists just trans people fighting other trans people. It's marginalized infighting in a community that only serves to benefit those in power already. The only people that benefit from trans medicalist views that set binary and non-binary trans people against each other are those stoking those angers and resentments in the first place, the lawmakers and pundits attacking trans rights. Trans medicalists must be pushed back against because of this, and I'm not here to say that they shouldn't be. We should call out horrible people being horrible and not understanding those who are right in close proximity to them willing to educate them. But they are doing so because they themselves are misinformed and understandably angry. They're just angry at the wrong people. And as for Hunter Schafer, yes, I got back there in the end. My hope is that maybe we're misinterpreting this. Maybe she doesn't actually hold these views or has more at least nuanced thoughts on it than the simple ones that this post was espousing. And if not, I hope she is going to educate herself if she wishes to continue to be a trans leader that fights for everyone within her community. Because ultimately, my hope is that young trans folks like her who do face dysphoria, as she's been open about experiencing, aren't going to reinforce the same divisions that have hounded the trans community for so long, but reach out a hand in understanding that our community is already strong, but is stronger still when we stand together, united against those who are our real enemies.
You began a guided meditation video in your living room, but now you're taking your practice outdoors.
I love the ads. They're so much fun.
All right, I know that was a very long discussion. I actually did not intend this.
Okay, well, I think that's where he's leaving off, and I think that's where we're going to leave off. But basically, this whole video was, you don't have to have dysphoria to be trans. There is a definition of what trans can be. If you don't agree with gender stereotypes, then that inherently makes you trans. And all of those points are fucking stupid.
Yeah, because based on that, like, majority of everybody is trans, and that's just not factual.
It's really not. And it's quite frustrating when people like him like to present life-saving healthcare as being gender-affirming care versus like actual healthcare that you will die without. Like, my friend, if I am a week without insulin, I am dead. I am 6 feet under the earth. You not being able to have a fake vagina or a fake penis will not kill you. You might feel a bit sad, but you're not going to die from it.
Yeah, and I'm not for the whole, like, oh, I need to make sure everyone knows that I'm right, and everyone who I disagree with has to educate themselves. Why don't you educate yourself, sir? Why don't you read a book? Why don't you read Invisible Women and get back to me?
Bold of you to assume you can read.
Oh god, yeah. You know what? No, because he read The Handmaid's Tale, right?
He saw
He
it
can
on
read, he just
television.
can't
He didn't read the
comprehend
book.
clearly.
He saw it on the Hulu.
Oh my god, he saw it on TV. Never mind. Bold of me to assume he can read. After all, the estrogen turned his brain useless, right?
I mean, that's what they present it as. I mean, you take estrogen and skirt goes spinny and you can't do math anymore and everything is totally different because women are a completely different species, right?
Yeah, it's not as though when I finally got my testosterone levels lowered, I could actually study for real and pay attention to things and have a better memory in general. Like, oh my god. I just, sometimes, like, watching your videos makes me want to start my own YouTube channel.
Do it.
I have no idea. I don't know who would listen to me.
My love, I don't know what people listen to me either, considering that this is just like a thing I do for fun. This is my way of not annoying the people in my life by continually ranting about these topics, and yet there are 1,000+ people who think that this is something they care about enough to subscribe to and listen to. So, I mean, people want to hear that they're not alone. That's like the main thing of why I do the interviews, is to show that we're not alone. You know, like it's very lonely to realize what I feel like are very obvious truths to life, but it's very lonely to be able to realize and admit to those, and you know, being able to communicate with other people like this makes it a little bit less lonely. So anybody who is able to have a voice to say something, go ahead. I promise you people will listen.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it's like you're living in a society of only flat earthers, and you're like, no, it's a sphere, please. How many drinks did you end up finishing?
3 beers and 2 margaritas.
God bless you. I am still high.
Yeah, I was like, am I sober enough to go to the store to buy more things, or should I just deal with the hard liquor in the kitchen?
A lot
And
of
I
fun.
think I will just
Hanging out with you is fun.
I think I'm gonna just get some more hard liquor from the kitchen.
Sounds like a good time.
But yeah, thank you so much for watching this very long and very depressing video with me. I hope that at least some of this is, you know, usable content, considering that I am now at the very least tipsy.
Yes, for your sake, I hope some of this is useful content.
Even if not, this is like, I don't know, this isn't how lesbians court other women. This could be like the first date or something. I feel like that's how like lesbian courtships work. First you talk to them on Discord and make fun of other people, and then step 2 is you buy the U-Haul truck. Isn't that how it goes?
I mean, I wish I was a lesbian and I knew, but I unfortunately am just a bisexual woman. Though I would say if this is considered to be a first date, it was greatly enjoyable.
I'm sorry, I can't turn the flirtations off.
No worries. My brother was like, "Wow, you got a postcard from someone in Europe? Who's this? Your girlfriend?" And I was like, "Fucking, I wish, man."
I can't help it. I'm annoyingly flirtatious when I drink. Whenever I get to a desirable level of alcoholism, I just end up telling everyone that I love them and I think they're awesome and that we should get married. So
Sounds like you're gonna have a blast in Cambodia with all the butch women.
well, here's the hoping that I figure out where the hell I'm gonna be living at, because I mean, I'm leaving on fucking Friday and I still don't know if I have an apartment or not. So
Well, yeah, I hope you get that figured out.
if not, I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be totally fine. I will just walk 11 kilometers to work every day.
Please don't walk 11 kilometers. If you have to buy a shitty little bike, do it.
I will have the most ripped thighs ever, and I will be the most attractive American in Cambodia. It'll be awesome. I'm sure it'll work out.
It will take you literal hours to go home.
It's fine. It works out. It's fine. Don't question the madness. There's a map to this. It works out. I promise.
Well, I hope so, for your sake.
Alright, well, I'm gonna go ahead and stop that recording.